6843 Chapter 7. I just want to be me, a normal high school boy that has trouble talking to girls. Check. A not-so-secret crush that everyone except said secret crush knows about. Double check. A super hot, shape-shifting vixen whose sole purpose in life seems to revolve around getting into our hero's pants. Wait, what? Follow the tale of Kevin Swift as he deals with all of the ordinary things that most sophomores in high school have to deal with, as well as a few not-so-ordinary things that you would only ever expect to see happen in a shonen manga. I know you guys probably don't want to hear this, but my novel, A Fox's Love, is available on Amazon as both a Kindle ebook and paperback. The price of the Kindle edition has been lowered and is now $4.99 instead of $6.99, which was the original price. There is a link to each different Amazon on my profile. Please, if any of you would be willing to help me out, go to my profile page, click on the link to your respective country, and order a copy of my book. Your help would mean the world to me. Chapter 7. I just want to be me. The next morning Naruto did everything he would have normally done before Rias entered his life. He woke up, took a shower, made a basic breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, then left for school after locking up his apartment and rearming his traps. He didn't actually know why he bothered placing all those traps on his home now. Really, what was the point of having a trap that caused his porch to explode and his windows to send several thousand volts of electricity through any would-be intruder when people could just teleport directly into his bedroom? As soon as he reached Kuo Academy, Naruto deviated from his usual course, which would have involved him going to class and then falling asleep until class ended. There were more important things to worry about than grades and lectures by stuffy old professors that he never bothered listening to anyway. Instead of heading towards his homeroom, he went straight to the occult research club room. There, he found the situation to be about what he'd expected. Rias was sitting behind her desk. She had her hands laced together in front of her face. Her eyes were closed and there was a grave frown on her lips. Standing beside her were both Akeno and Graphia, one of whom looked decidedly unruffled and the other was clearly trying to put on a cheerful front, even though it was more than obvious that she was worried. Rias, Akeno-chan, Graphia. San, Naruto greeted, frowning at the end. He still wasn't used to using proper suffixes. No matter how many times Tsunade had insisted on the need to use proper suffixes, he had never really bothered. A part of him wondered why he was doing so now. Was it this woman's presence? Her regal bearing? He couldn't say. There was nothing about her that screamed, "Speak properly to me," any more than when he was in Ba-chan's presence. All he knew was that not knowing why he was acting on lessons he never used before bothered him. Akeno smiled a patently false smile as she greeted him. Naruto would never claim to be a master of reading body language, but if there was one thing he could do and do well, it was reading another person's smile. Hers was as fake as they came. "How are you doing today, Kitsune-kun?" "I've been better," Naruto responded dryly. "I didn't sleep as well as I normally did last night." He locked eyes with Rias, whose eyes had snapped open at his entrance. She was staring at him with so many conflicting emotions on her face it was impossible to know what she was feeling. "How about you, Rias? Are you feeling any better?" Yes, she lied and they both knew it. Still, for the sake of appearing strong, neither of them said anything that contradicted this. "Thank you for asking." Naruto gave her a small half-smile. "Anything for my cane." Moving over to the couch, Naruto sat down, crossed one leg over his thigh and stretched his arms across the headrest. No one decided to question him on why he was there and not in class. Rias knew him enough to know that he would not be able to focus on class with everything that had happened last night. Akeno likely didn't care, and she wouldn't say anything anyways, since she was also skipping class. Naruto had no clue what Graphia thought, but he wasn't all that sure he cared what she thought, so it worked out. The silence within the room was stifling as they waited for the others to arrive. Naruto was tempted to ask Rias to tell him what was going on, but he knew her well enough to know she would want to tell the rest of her peerage as well. Thus, he was reduced to waiting in tense silence like everyone else. To pass the time, the spiky-haired Uzumaki amused himself by picturing Graphia dressed in cosplay outfits. It was surprisingly easy to do thanks to her clothes. The images his mind conjured of the woman with the regal bearing wearing Neko ears and a tail saying, "NYA," as she held up pod hands was definitely a funny one. "Something you find amusing, Naruto-san?" asked Graphia as Naruto started snickering. And nothing, hee. I just thought of something funny. Naruto coughed into his hands a few times, trying to calm down. He didn't think the woman would take it well if she knew he was conjuring images of her in naughty cosplay costumes. Nothing to worry about. Graphia looked at him suspiciously, but did not say anything else. A few seconds later the door opened and a person walked in. Naruto was not surprised that the first person to show up after him was Kaneko. As a first year, her last period of the class was free, which was why she normally showed up earlier than him and the others. As soon as she entered the room, her eyes locked onto Naruto. Without offering even a courtesy greeting to the others, she made a beeline for him and unhesitatingly crawled onto his lap before she gave him an expectant look. Naruto just smiled humorously as he began giving the adorable girl his customary treatment. Graphia looked over at Rias after watching the white-haired first-year purring against the male her husband's sister tried seducing last night, a single eyebrow raised. "Don't ask," Rias sighed, her shoulders slumping a little bit. "Just, don't ask." "Very well," Graphia said emotionlessly as she went back to standing like a statue. "I won't ask." It wasn't long, relatively speaking, before the other members of Rias' peerage filed in. They all noticed the new addition, that of the gorgeous woman with silver hair and eyes in the maid outfit. Issei damn near died of blood loss when he first caught a glimpse of her. Not that Naruto blamed the boy. Graphia, despite whatever thoughts he had on the woman, was definitely gorgeous, and she gave off that regal aura expected of a queen despite her questionable choice in clothing. "Good, you're all here." Rias stood up from her chair. "Rias-sama," Graphia looked at her. "Would like me to explain the situation to them?" "No," Rias closed her eyes. "It would be better if they heard this from me." Opening her eyes again, her bluish-green orbs locked onto each member of her peerage. Naruto couldn't be sure, but he thought they lingered on his a little longer than the others. "There is something I need to tell you all. It is difficult to explain, but I—" Before Rias could speak any further, an orange glow began emitting from the floor, interrupting the redhead from saying any more. There was just enough time to see the magic circle with an unfamiliar crest come to life on the carpet before the entire thing burst into flames. Whoever was teleporting into the room obviously had a flair for dramatics. Before the flames fully dispersed, a figure appeared inside of the fire. There was a gust of wind that put the blaze out, finally revealing the person who had so blatantly disrupted their meeting. The person in question was a man around his early 20s with short yellow hair and dark blue eyes. He was wearing a burgundy blazer with gold embroidery on the right, matching pants and black dress shoes. Underneath was a white dress shirt that was not fully buttoned, giving a view of his muscular chest. Naruto did not like him. Just from a single glance, the blonde had already determined what kind of person this guy was, having seen his type plenty of times before. He was the handsome playboy type who had everything handed to him since birth and whose head was so large he could probably power a city the size of Tokyo for years if they learned how to harness all the hot air he had bloating his overinflated ego. In Naruto terms, this guy was a certified douchebag. "It's been a long time since I came to the human world," the man said, his eyes looking around the room before landing on Rias. When Naruto saw the delight spring into those eyes, he had to quell the sudden urge to punch the man's face in. The way Rias shuddered in disgust did not help impede this emotion any. "My darling, Rias. I'm so happy to see you." Riser Phenex, the way Rias said his name did not invoke pleasant thoughts. It was a name spoken with disgust and enough disdain to fill the building. She obviously didn't like him. "I just came here to inform you that the date has been set." Riser walked over to the desk Rias was using a shield to keep them apart. "Now, while I know it's a little sudden, I thought we could go visit the location the ceremony is taking place in. I've already told you, Riser, I have no intention of marrying you." Married? Issei cried out in shock. "What the hell is going on? Bucko, who the hell is this guy?" All eyes turned to Issei. Riser looked at him like one might look at a bug. "Who are you?" "I'm Hyodo Issei, Rias Gremory-sama's pawn." Wow, that actually sounded pretty formal. Naruto wondered if the boy had been practicing that line. "Ah," Riser deadpanned in an uncaring manner, "I see. And you didn't answer my question, who are you?" "I'm surprised you didn't tell your servants about me," Riser said to Rias. "Though I'm even more surprised he doesn't know me. But then, he does smell like a human. That would make him a reincarnated devil, so I guess it would make sense." I didn't say anything because there was no need to tell them about you. She jabbed at him, her words making him sound like he was nothing more than a pest, something so insignificant he was beneath her notice. Riser gave her a fixed smile. You're as harsh as usual, I see. This is Riser Phenex-sama, Graphia informed Issei and everyone else. He is a pureblood, high-class devil, and is the third son from the legendary Phenex family. He is also Rias-sama's fiancé. Fiancé. Issei gawked, his mind unable to comprehend the words coming out of Graphia's mouth. When she gave him a serious nod, completely unfrazzled, unlike the perverted second year, Issei did what all teenagers do when overwhelmed with too much information. He fainted. How embarrassing. Cat CHRP, enough. Riser. Rias slammed her hands onto the desk as she glared at the blonde man standing before her. If looks could kill, Riser would have been dead before he even had a chance to utter his last name. I've already told you, I'm not going to marry you. You say that like you have a choice. Riser sounded amused, but there was also a hint of steel in his voice. We both know there isn't much you can do. Both our families have already decided on this and the contract's been written up. Don't forget that your family has been just as hasty to unite our two houses as mine. Don't speak so presumptuously. Rias narrowed her eyes. As the heir to the Gremory family, I am the one who will decide who gets to be my partner. And regardless of that, I was already promised that I would be allowed to do as I pleased until after I graduated from a university in the human world. I fear you don't quite understand the situation, Rias my dear, Riser said snidely. Your parents and Sirzek-sama fear your household may go extinct. In the previous war between gods, fallen angels and devils, many pure-blooded devils lost their lives in the conflict. And that's not even mentioning the number of households that went extinct. It's only natural that our parents would struggle to protect our pure blood and household by joining together. The offspring of two high-ranking, pure-blooded devils is invaluable. Even you should know that. Sitting on the couch, carefully caressing Kaniko's ears, Naruto kept his ears open to everything that was being said. He didn't like what he was hearing. Tsunade had taught him a lot about Konoha, including everything she knew about the clans within its walls. This included the Hyuga clan. What this man, this Riser, was talking about sounded far too much like what the Hyuga did by forcing bird-caged seals on their members and putting them in arranged marriages with cousins to keep the blood pure. This wasn't quite as bad as that, there was no incest involved, but forcing someone into an arranged marriage because of superficial fears rankled on his nerves. It was almost, but not quite as bad as someone insulting his ramen. Or the color orange. Recently, newly reincarnated devils like your servants have been gaining greater influence. Pretty soon, pure blood devils like us are going to lose all of our power until we have no standing left. Your brother, Sirzek-sama, has left the household, which means the only one who can succeed and become the Gremory clan head is you. With many of the 72 pillars collapsing on themselves, the future of all pureblood devils is hanging on this marriage proposal. Naruto ignored Issei asking Kiba to explain the 72 pillars to him. He already knew about them thanks to Akeno and Rias. Instead, he focused on what Riser and Rias were talking was the more important information in his mind. In some ways, what the prick was saying made sense. Pure blood devils were apparently becoming a rare commodity these days. They were sort of like the bloodline clans that were so famous in his world. And just like those clans, they were more concerned about keeping their blood pure and untainted by outsiders than they were about the individuals in their clan. At least, that was what he was getting out of all this. I won't destroy my household. Rias crossed her arms over her chest. I plan on siring an heir when I'm ready. Her eyes sharpened like blades as she glared at Riser. But I won't marry you. I'll marry someone of my own choosing. Even the heirs of old households have that much of a right. Riser gave a long-suffering sigh. His fingers twitched in agitation, a sure sign that he was beginning to lose his patience. You know, Rias, like you, I am a pure blood devil of an old household. I bear the powerful name of Phenex. I can't let that name get tarnished. I came all the way out here to the human world just to get you, but I don't like the human world much. Flames erupted from Riser's back, taking the form of wings and showing just why his clan name was Phenex. The fires from his back spread. The sweltering heat had the members of Rias' peerage sweating profusely, their bodies becoming drenched in salty water and their clothes caking to their skin. Strangely enough, none of them were burned from the incredible heat. Naruto knew what this was. A show of skill. Riser was showing off. And it was beginning to piss him off. The flames of this world are filthy. For a devil who holds governance over wind and fire, it's unbearable. His eyes narrowed. I will take you back to the underworld with me. He looked over at her servants. Akeno, Asia, Issei and Kiba. Naruto and Kaneko were on the other side. Even if I have to incinerate your servants to do it. You lay one hand on my servants and I'll put those flames of yours out. Rias clenched her teeth. How dare this man threaten the lives of her servants? There was no way she could let such a threat go unpunished. Riser-sama, Graphia said, I suggest you calm down, or you may find those flames of yours getting doused. Oh, well, if the one who was given the title of strongest queen is getting involved, then I guess there's no helping it. I wouldn't want to have to face Supportexover's peerage. It has always been said that the Red Satan's peerage is full of indestructible monsters. Actually, I am not the one you should be worrying about, Graphia corrected. That was when Riser and everyone else noticed it. One of the members of Ria's peerage had moved. Naruto stood behind Riser, two blades in his hand, one pressing against Riser's back, the other being held so lightly against his throat that Riser did not even realize it was there until he looked down. These blades were much different from standard weapons. They were not solid, they were liquid. Water, to be precise. One thing everyone noticed about the blades was that despite their elemental composition being water, they were not dissipating from the heat of Razor's flames. There wasn't even a bit of steam coming off them. As everyone was trying to figure out when Naruto had moved and Kaneko was blinking as she realized her head was no longer being pet, Naruto spoke up in a voice that was very casual, but had an underlying hint of steel in it. I would suggest that in the future, you refrain from threatening Ria's peerage. I don't take threats on my family lightly. The blade near Riser's throat came close enough to Gray's skin, hissing slightly as water met fire. Understand? Riser eyed the blade near his throat, frowning. For a second, he upped the power of his clan's fire. But all that did was cause Naruto to pump more chakra into his blade. Very soon, the heat within the room became overbearing as Riser did his best to dissolve the water blade. In return, Naruto narrowed his eyes and began pumping even more chakra into the blade to keep its form and consistency. His teeth were grit and several beads of sweat trickled down his forehead as he was forced to put more chakra than he had originally intended into his water blade. The heat Riser was producing only compounded to his problems. It was getting harder to breathe, and sweat was starting to get into his eyes. He was also beginning to run out of chakra. If this kept up, Naruto knew he was going to be the first one to give in. Riser had more power than he did. For the moment. Thankfully, before Riser could decide to up the ante anymore, Graphia stepped in. Enough, she spoke in a calm, but cold voice that had many of those in the room shivering despite the heat. Riser-sama. I believe I told you to calm down. Naruto, that's enough, Rias added. No sense in adding fuel to this already intense fire. I guess you did. Riser let his flames dissolve while Naruto's water blades dispersed. TCH. With a small tisk of disappointment, the blonde Uzumaki walked back over to Kaneko, sat down, and pulled her back into his lap. Pretty soon, the cute first year was purring in delight as Naruto worked her ears over good and acted as if nothing had happened. Needless to say, the sweat drops were in abundance. Supportexover suspected the situation would become like this. If neither of you can settle this with words, then we will have to resolve this issue with means of a last resort. Last resort? Rias looked at Graphia in bland confusion, which soon turned to shock upon the beautiful woman's next words. Rias-sama, if you're going to be so insistent with your wish to not marry Riser-sama, then you will have to settle this with a rating game. Correct me if I'm wrong, Naruto decided to interrupt. But from my understanding only adult devils can compete in a rating game. Rias has not yet risen to the status of an adult, so how could she compete in one? Naruto narrowed his eyes as a thought suddenly occurred to him. Or is this going to be an unofficially sanctioned game? It is as you say, Graphia bowed her head towards Naruto in acknowledgement. While Rias-sama cannot participate in an official match, it's perfectly legal for a non-adult devil to participate in unofficial matches. That you are even suggesting this option means that Father and the others have already thought of the possibility of my refusal and have made all the necessary preparations for the game to take place. Rias' eyes closed tightly. Tell me, how long are they going to keep interfering with my life until they are satisfied? Does that mean you refuse to participate? Of course not, Rias straightened up. No longer was she projecting the image of someone who was lost and unsure of what she should do. Instead, she was giving off the aura of someone who had made a decision and was going to see it through to the end. There's no way I'm going to pass up an opportunity like this. She turned to the man who claimed to be her fiancé. Eyes narrowed in a tight glare. Riser Phenex, I challenge you to a rating game in order to settle this dispute. Cat CHRP, with the challenge thrown down, Riser had no choice but to accept the rating game. Not that he had any reason not to. It was clear to everyone that he was favored to win, not just because he was a fully matured devil, but also because he had far more experience in rating games than Rias. He accepted the challenge with glee, and even went so far as to give Rias and her peerage a 10-day grace period they could use to prepare themselves with. Naruto knew why the asshat had given them those 10 days. It wasn't a magnanimous offer or anything of the sort, but a jab at Rias and the strength of her peerage. He was basically telling her it didn't matter how much they trained, she would still lose. This did not concern Naruto. If anything, it just pumped him up even more. He was not going to let some douchebag who thought he was the biggest thing since Uchiha Madara get away with insulting his king or his friends. When the time came for the rating games, he had every intention of kicking that guy's sorry ass from here to the elemental nations, or his name wasn't Uzumaki Naruto. Come on, Issei, hurry it up. A snicker managed to escape his lips as he heard his king calling for the perverted second-year student and currently the weakest member among their peerage. The day after Rias issued Riser a challenge to a rating game, the red-haired heiress to the House of Gremory had decided to take them up to a secluded villa in the mountains so they could train without people getting suspicious. Apparently, her family owned the area they would be staying at. Just how rich did someone have to be to own a mountain anyways? Seriously, Rias' family must be loaded. Naruto was actually pretty pleased with this turnout. Having been forced to stay within the city limits, he had not been able to practice his more powerful and destructive jutsu. He had been wanting to see what he could and could not do without worrying about the collateral damage his attacks might cause. Some he knew were still out of reach due to chakra requirements. For example, Naruto did not have enough chakra to use the Rasengan, yet just getting the damn thing to form took most of his reserves. Pumping a constant amount of chakra into the jutsu to let it keep its form was damn near impossible, but with some more intensive training, that would change. He did not believe he would be able to get up to the level he had been at the height of the 4th grade shinobi war. But Naruto at least wanted to be at the level of a Jonin. That was his goal for the next 10 days. Train his ass off and become at least as strong as the average level Jonin. Shouldn't we help him? Asked a worried Asia. The young blonde girl looked back and forth between Rias and the nearly dead on his feet Issei. Said boy was currently trying to hike up the mountain they were on. Trying being the keyword in this instance. The poor boy looked like he was about to drop right then and there. I mean, he's carrying all my luggage as well, so it would only be right for me to help out too, right? Don't worry about it. Rias waved Asia's concerns away. If Issei can't even handle that much, then he'll never get any stronger. And speaking of handling a lot of weight, the redhead's eyes turned to Naruto. Just where is all of your stuff? Sealing scrolls. Naruto absently patted the kunai pouch attached to his left hip. One of my specialties is called sealing. With it, I can seal things like items and various objects inside of scrolls. Some people who are really good at sealing can even seal energy, elements and people within a seal, though I'm not that good yet. He had been getting there though. He could seal energy at least, though the seals were unstable and would break at the slightest miscalculation. It was a very good thing he used clones to practice sealing and not himself. The explosion that had literally blew his clone apart when it had first started practicing making energy seals had been no joke. It still gave him nightmares. I've never heard of sealing before. Akeno actually looked very interested in his abilities. What type of magic is that? It's not magic, Naruto corrected. It's jutsu. Fuinjutsu, to be exact. It's a ninja art that some humans can learn. Chakra ability, Kaneko added. That's right, Naruto tilted his head back so he could nuzzle his cheek affectionately against Kaneko's. The girl purred in repressed pleasure as she rubbed back. I knew there was a reason I loved you. Rias twitched while Kaneko blushed. Akeno did her, Era, and Naruto. Well, he wasn't even paying attention to the reaction the others were giving. He was a little too busy lavishing praise and affection on Kaneko. I'm surprised you knew about that. I didn't think anyone here would know about chakra. I see. Rias clenched her fist into a tight ball as she tried to resist the urge to grab Kaneko, toss her into a deep pit and then pinch Naruto's cheek hard enough that it became red and swollen. You'd think she'd get used to it after watching it happen so often, but nope, it still bothered her like nothing else. She made a mental note to keep those two as far away from each other as possible during this trip. I take it you did the same thing to the items Kaneko was carrying? Yep. I see, Rias repeated. Just one more question. Why are you carrying Kaneko on your back? Because I felt like it, Naruto answered with a beaming smile that made Rias grit her teeth in irritation. Naruto was her servant. Not Kaneko's. He should be carrying her like that. No, wait, he should be carrying her in his arms. Rias blinked, then shook her head. Where did those thoughts come from? Oh, that reminds me. His fingers gently squeezed the powerful thigh muscles he was holding to keep the girl from falling off. Are you comfortable, Kaneko-chan? Fine, Kaneko purred as she pressed her face against the back of his neck. Warm. Rias grit her teeth. Neither Naruto nor Kaneko noticed, but Akeno did, and she was nothing if not amused. Era. I think I've been told that before. Naruto looked thoughtful. Ba-chan once told me that my body is always running at 130 degrees all the time. It's actually the reason I've never been sick before. I didn't think it was possible for a human to have a temperature that high. Rias frowned. Wouldn't you die long before your body reached that temperature? Probably, Naruto replied cheerfully. He was completely oblivious to the large drops of sweat running down Kiba's, Akino's and Asia's head. But I've always been different from other people. Even back when I was a human, people thought I was weird. This is just one of those things I sort of accepted that was different about me. I see, Rias said softly. She guessed this was just one of those mysteries that let her know she still didn't know Naruto as well as she wanted to. At least they had a whole 10 days in which she could get to know him better. Come along, Kaneko-chan. Our training awaits. If she could separate him and Kaneko, that is. Cat CHRP. The place Rias had them staying at was just as extravagant as Naruto suspected it would be. A beautiful-looking, several-story Western-style mansion with dozens of windows and cream-colored walls. Naruto could not judge how large it was, but it was definitely bigger than the old-school building their clubroom was located in. It was surrounded by a just as gorgeous garden that looked like someone had spent their entire life cultivating and pruning it. From where they were standing, Naruto could see a Greek gazebo next to a pond filled with crystal-clear blue water. Behind the estate itself was a large copse of trees that led into a deep forest of viridian colors, presenting a pleasant background to the majestic-looking mansion. According to Rias, this place was a summer home that her family rarely ever used. It was just another reminder of how wealthy her family was that they could afford their own summer estate and never live there. Almost as soon as they arrived at the estate and put all their stuff away, Rias had them get started with training. She had Kiba work with Issei to teach him how to wield a sword. In her words, giving Issei experience with weaponry would not only help him learn how to fight a weapons user, but also add another means of fighting to his arsenal. Unfortunately, it wasn't going as well as she had probably hoped. Issei was hopeless as a swordsman. He had no coordination, his grip was too soft, his swings too slow, and he completely lacked the grace, power, and speed required of someone wielding a blade. The only thing the young man had going for him was sheer determination, and that could only take a person so far. Naruto had learned that the hard way. He still had the scars to prove it. While Rias Pawn was unsuccessfully trying to learn his way around a blade, Naruto had decided to ask Kaneko for a spar. Which was how the two of them found themselves in a forested section several dozen meters away from everyone else. It was here that Naruto realized Kaneko was quite the little fighter. He had seen her in action before, when she was fighting that giant rogue devil, but it hadn't quite sunken in just how powerful she was until now. Naruto jumped back as the white-haired first year landed on the ground he had just been standing on, the heel of her left foot smashing into the earth with great force. Large chunks of rock and gravel were upheaved and the ground shook like it had been struck by a mini cataclysm. The surrounding area from the center of impact cratered and several large cracks spread out from where Kaneko's foot had struck, lifting up even more of the earth to create what almost looked like miniature cliff faces. A whistle escaped Naruto's lips as he saw the damage done. Had that attack hit, it would have surely done some fierce damage to him. It definitely would have rattled his bones and organs, and might have even been enough to kill him provided it hit him somewhere his body was weak, like his ribs or his neck. It seemed his thoughts on Kaniko's physical prowess were correct. The girl had all the strength of Tsunade. Of course, saying she had Tsunade's strength was a bit of a misnomer. Physically speaking, Naruto would say that Kaniko was just as strong as Tsunade physically. With a single punch, Kaniko could cause the ground to crater, the earth to split. She could destroy boulders like they were made of onigiri and was capable of lifting and throwing objects that were 15 times her weight and several times her mass. In a perfectly physical sense, they were probably about the same. At the same time, Tsunade would have kicked the cute little girl's small, shapely ass 6 ways to Sunday. While there was no clear difference in their physical prowess, their fighting styles were another matter entirely. As strong as Kaniko was, she was also predictable. Too predictable. Her punches were entirely linear, coming in projected arcs that even a genin could see them coming from a mile away. They were also very slow, allowing Naruto plenty of time to weave his way between her strikes and get a few shots of his own end. To put things simply, she lacked the battle experience that made fighting against the woman who would go on to become Godem Hokage such a nightmare. A second after the dust that had been kicked up by Kaniko's latest attack began to settle, the girl in question jumped out from the crater she had caused, hopping over the uplifted pieces of earth and landing on the ground close to his position. Almost as soon as her feet touched the ground, the girl with amber eyes charged him. Naruto watched Kaniko throw a punch the moment she was close enough to do so. Her execution was perfect. She brought her fist in tightly against her torso, hand clenched into a fist, palm pointed towards the sky. When she released, the fist corkscrewed as her arm extended towards him. It was a textbook chamber punch, executed so perfectly made a guy would have cried manly tears and shouted about how Kaniko was in the springtime of her youth. It was also far too slow. Like water as it flowed around the rock in its path, Naruto dodged the attack. His right foot moved as he pivoted ever so slightly to the right. At the same time his left hand came up and redirected Kaniko's hand, pushing it wide. The move not only served to redirect her strength, but with her forward momentum being as great as it was, it also did a splendid job of knocking the girl off balance. She stumbled forward while Naruto slid into her guard, his fingers poking her in the underarm, clavicle and her neck at the base of her spine in quick succession. Then he was past her, his stance relaxed as the girl halted her forward momentum, fist still extended, eyes blinking as she realized her opponent was no longer in front of her. She turned around to see Naruto standing there, watching her with eyes that were much sharper than the kind and slightly goofy ones she was so used to. What had just happened? Shaking her head, Kaniko came at him again, this time unleashing a barrage of punches, none of which hit Naruto. The last member of the Uzumaki clan was like the wind. He never stayed in one place. Constantly, the young man with the spiky blonde hair moved, weaving and dodging each attack like he knew they were coming long before the attack was even executed. Sometimes his hands would move as well, flashing up and knocking Kaniko's strikes away from his body, thereby redirecting and disrupting the flow of kinetic energy and making the girl stumble. When this happened, he would poke her in the areas that would be considered kill points on a person if he were to stab them with a kunai, then move past her. It was only after 6 minutes of this happening over and over again that Kaniko stopped attacking and stared at her sparring partner with surprised eyes. "How do you keep dodging me?" It was her longest sentence to date. "That's not the question you should be asking," Naruto told her. "You should really be asking how come you can't hit me." He took a look around at the numerous craters and cracks in the ground from her misses. A good deal of her attacks had left craters that were at least 2 or 3 feet wide, some that were even a meter wide, and the cracks looked like miniature trenches that were caused by earthquakes splitting the earth open. All of your attacks were perfectly executed, textbook attacks. The problem is they're far too predictable to hit someone who is much faster than you. Rather than wonder why he seemed to know so much about fighting, Kaniko merely accepted it and asked the obvious question, "What should I do?" "The first thing we need to do is work on getting your speed up." Naruto rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "I have a few ways to do this, but I think the best one is to use weights on your arms and legs to increase your speed. I normally wouldn't suggest this, but as you're a rook and their power is absolute defense and incredible strength, it will work the best for you. You won't ever be at Kiba's speed, but you don't really need to be either. This is just to give you that added oomph, so you can surprise your opponents. Kaneko nodded. The second thing we need to do is work on finding you a style that fits your body type and abilities. Looking her up and down for a moment, Naruto nodded to himself. You're very cute. Kaneko blushed at the very blunt compliment to her looks. Not that Naruto noticed, busy as he was in his sensei mode, which was, ironically enough, reminiscent of how Jiraiya acted when he taught Naruto. Most people would either be taken in by your cuteness, or underestimate you because of it. You could easily use that to lure people into a trap. Let them attack you first and use your absolute defense to withstand their first blow. Once you do, you can grab onto their offending limb, and from there you have a whole slew of attacks available for you to capitalize on. Having been part of the war against Uchiha Madara, Naruto had seen a number of different fighting styles in play. He remembered one of the smaller shinobi he had rescued from the Zetsu clone army fought like that. Trap them? Yes, for example, throw a punch at me in slow motion. Kaneko did as asked, once more punching at him, but it moved so slowly that even to a normal human it would look like her fist was going in slow motion. The attack connected as Naruto did nothing to stop it. But as soon as it did hit, he grabbed onto her forearm and stuck his hand to her limb with chakra. You see this? Now that I have you in my grasp, your options are very limited. You could attack with your other hand, of course, but if I were a rook, the only way such an attack would work is if you were another rook. Any other piece aside from maybe a queen would need room to create an attack strong enough to break your defense. And unlike you, I actually have several avenues open. I could hit you with a straight jab to the face, or attack with an open palm to the torso, and because you're already coming towards me, any attack I launch will strike with that much more force. I could also use my feet, kicking you in the stomach or stomping on your kneecaps. If I wanted to, I could even trip you up and attack while you're down. To give her an example of what he was talking about, Naruto's foot suddenly shot out. His toes hooked itself against the back of Kaneko's knee. With little warning he yanked his foot back, forcing the knee to give out at the sudden and unexpected force. Because the knee was a synovial joint that could only bend in the direction Naruto had forced it to without removing the kneecap, and Kaneko had no time to prepare for the attack, the silver-haired female's entire body was forced to bend backwards. Not even a second later, Kaneko found herself lying flat on her back, Naruto straddling her stomach as the knuckles of his right fist just barely touched her nose. For several seconds, the two simply lay there, Kaneko blinking up at Naruto with lightly flushed cheeks as the blonde boy grinned down at her. The seconds passed, Naruto waiting just long enough for his sparring partner to realize what had happened before he got off her and offered his hand, which Kaneko accepted. You see what I mean? Asked Naruto. Kaneko nodded. Take the first punch, grab on, and attack while they're too surprised to react. Exactly, Naruto was grinning widely as he placed a hand on her hair and scratched her right ear. You're a quick learner. It took me many beatings from my old sensei before I learned anything. Kaneko flushed from his praise. And the way his hand scratched her ear. It felt so good. Naruto looked up at the sky. The sun was beginning to set. Anyway, it's getting late. Rias should be done training eyes by now. Let's go back. The pair soon made their way back over to where Rias was watching Issei getting beaten by Kiba. Just looking at the boy getting slaughtered as he swung his sword like a half-crazed maniac made Naruto shake his head. Swordsmanship was clearly not Issei's forte. Not that he could say it was his either. The last time he'd tried using a sword, Naruto almost ended up cutting his own head off as opposed to his enemies. How's his training going? Asked Naruto as he walked up to Rias, Kaneko trailing behind him. As well as can be expected, she sighed as Issei once again tried to hit Kiba to no avail. The blonde pretty boy managed to glide around the swing, launched his way with simplistic ease and attack Issei from behind, striking him lightly in the neck. Had this been a real battle and Kiba using a real sword, Issei would have been a head shorter. I don't think this type of training is going to work for him, Naruto declared. Issei's not a swordsman. He's a brawler. Trying to impose elegance on his movements is like putting udon noodles in miso soup and calling it ramen. Just because you mix noodles and soup together in the same bowl doesn't make it ramen. Without the proper ingredients and additives, udon noodles and miso soup are just that. That's a really interesting analogy. Rias spoke with a large drop of sweat running down her face. She shook her head at the very Naruto comment and tried to get back on track. So what would you suggest? You have him in Asia training with Akano after this, right? Asked Naruto. Rias nodded. And I'm guessing Kaneko is going to have a hand in training him during the afternoon. Another nod. I want to train him after dinner then, when the sun goes down. I suppose I could let you do that, Rias said contemplatively, casting a side glance at him. May I ask what you're going to train him in? Naruto smiled. It was not a very nice smile. Survival training. Issei, who was trying to dodge Kiba's latest series of attacks, shivered, which led to him getting smacked in the face. As he rubbed his nose, the boy could not help but wonder. Why did it suddenly feel like the Shinigami had come to claim him? Cat CHRP, Issei grumbled as he walked through the sea of trees. He'd had a trying day so far, constantly losing to Kiba, conjuring only a tiny sphere of magic while Asia conjured a baseball-sized one, getting his ass kicked by Kaneko. There was no end to the tortures he had gone through this day, and that wasn't even the worst of it. No, while all that was humiliating, the worst training by far was what Bucko made him do. She had him running up a mountain, with a boulder tied to his back, while she sat on it, and then she had him do 300 push-ups. And he had still been wearing that damn boulder. His back was killing him. It felt like his spine had been snapped in half. And now, after eating a large dinner, Rias had told him to go into the forest near the estate for his last lesson of the day. What more could they try to teach him? Hadn't he already been tortured enough? Apparently not. While walking through the dense foliage of trees, Issei failed to watch where he was stepping. Because of this, he didn't even realize he had stepped on something until a loud twang alerted him to that fact. Looking down, Issei could see something glinting in the moonlight. It looked like a steel wire. The wire snapped, and suddenly over a dozen kunai whizzed out from where they had been hidden deep within the foliage. Issei dodged the attack by belly flopping onto the ground. This proved to be a mistake as he suddenly felt several sharp, pointy somethings impaling his butt cheeks with incredible force. Gia! Squealing like a little girl, Issei reached behind him and grabbed one of the sharp objects. A quick yank pulled it out. The pain made him wince, but he tried to ignore the sharp stinging in his ass and brought the object to his face. The object was a very thin, steel needle. Senbon. Used for acupuncture. What the hell? The crunch of booted feet alerted Issei to the presence of someone else coming towards him. He tried to stand up, but his butt was feeling strangely numb. In fact, he couldn't feel much at all around his hind area. Spiky blonde hair came into view, and a pair of amused blue eyes looked down at him. Good evening, Arrow Debagame. You, Issei roared. He tried to stand again, but once more only succeeded in landing flat on his face. What the hell is going on, idiot blonde? I've decided to help you get stronger, Naruto said, smiling a very eerie smile that instantly put Issei on edge. For some reason, that smile was making the hairs on the back of his neck raise. What was this strange fear he was feeling? But you're a new devil like me, right? Issei asked, trying to get over the almost overwhelming sense of, holy shit. I have to get the hell out of here. That seemed to have overcome him. How could you help me get stronger? You should be just as strong as I am. Wrong, unlike you, who grew up living a normal life with a normal family. I grew up being trained to fight since I was a child. I know combat, I know fighting, I know how to kick ass, take names and stick it to the man. And I am going to teach you what I know. Really? Really? Whoa. Who knew that Naruto was actually some kind of child super solider? Maybe those rumors he had heard through the Kuo Academy grapevine about the spiky-headed blonde being a former assassin that used to be employed by an Italian mob boss had some truth to them. Despite himself, Issei actually began to feel a bit excited. Perhaps Naruto would be able to help him get stronger. At least he should be able to, if the blonde was as strong as he claimed. What are we going to do? Asked Issei, wincing a bit as he finally managed to stand up now that he had pulled all the senbon from his ass. Feeling was beginning to return, and he was starting to wish it hadn't. Sparring? Sword fighting? Magic battle? Exercise? I suppose you could say this is an exercise of a sort, Naruto answered vaguely. You see, I am going to try to kill you. All you have to do is not get killed. Cat CHRP. Early the next morning, Naruto took Kaneko out to the same forested clearing they had been sparring in the other day for some more training. It looked much different now than it had yesterday. The previous day it had simply been full of craters, upturned rocks, and large cracks. Now it was also littered with sharp, pointy objects and blood splatters on the ground and trees. "What happened here?" asked Kaneko. "I was training eyes." Ah. Since this was caused by Issei getting trained, Kaneko decided to ignore the blood and weapons. They were simply signs that Issei was still weak, which she already knew. "I managed to get the weights for you." Kaneko looked at Naruto in surprise. "Already?" "Yep," the blonde grinned as he handed her 2 pairs of bands, one pair that went on the wrists and another that went around the ankles. "What are these?" "Sealed bands," Naruto answered. "See those seals right there?" He pointed out the strange kanji and symbols that went around the entirety of the bands. "These seals add weight, though it would be more accurate to say they seal away the speed you can attack at. They will make it feel as if your arms and legs are wading through jelly and will force your muscles to work harder in order to compensate, thereby increasing the speed you can attack with. Just by keeping these on you can increase your speed nearly 2-fold in just under a week." Naruto had never told anyone this, but Jiraiya had used these seals when he had been refining the horrid mess the blonde Uzumaki called taijutsu. They had only used this type of training for 2 months. The human body was not made to withstand that kind of abuse, but 2 months had been enough to bring his taijutsu up to par with most chunin and jonin. The rest of his hand-to-hand talent had come from experience. "Useful," Kaneko said as she slipped the bands on. "I know," Naruto grinned. "Anyway, I want you to wear these everywhere you go except when taking a bath. This way, you'll get stronger even when you're not training. At the end of the first 5 days, we'll take them off to see how far you've progressed and get you accustomed to your new speed, then put them back on the last 5 days. "Sounds good. Okay then, hold out your hands." Kaneko did as told and watched as Naruto channeled chakra into the bands. At first Kaneko did not feel anything, but after several seconds her arms dropped to her side without warning. She tried to move them, but found that just making them move at all it was very difficult. It felt like they were stuck in a very thick, quick-drying cement. And then he did her legs. Just making them move after that became a task in and of itself. She could hardly even lift them. There, Naruto stood back up and clapped his hands together once. "Once you're capable of moving around in those, we'll start sparring again." "Okay. Naruto-senpai." Kaneko began to walk around, looking almost like a spaceman on the moon except without the near-zero gravity to make her float. Each movement she made was incredibly slow, as if someone were watching a movie at a mere 20th of its normal speed. Naruto thought it was one of the funniest things he had seen in a while. Not quite as funny as watching Issei flounder about while he threw kunai at the boy, but definitely up there. Cat CHRP. Rias sighed as she sat up in her bed, unable to sleep. Ever since coming to this place she had been feeling restless. Despite how upbeat and optimistic she had been acting for the past few days, the truth was she had been very worried. Even though they had 10 days to get ready, there was simply no way to know if that would be enough time to prepare her peerage to face off against Riser. She didn't even know if she would be ready to face Riser when the time came. Deciding that if she couldn't get to sleep, she would at least try and do something productive, Rias slipped out of bed and put a sheer nightgown over her naked form. Slipping on a pair of slippers and grabbing her glasses and a folder of documents that were sitting on her nightstand, she walked out of her room and made her way downstairs. She found a surprise waiting for her there. Naruto? Sitting on the couch with a calligraphy brush in one hand and several sheets of paper splayed out across the table was her most enigmatic servant. He had a serious expression on his face, not as grave as the one on the night she tried to make him take her virginity, but definitely stony enough that she could not help but think it didn't belong there. She couldn't tell what he was doing, but it looked like he was studying something. Naruto looked up, a grin crawling onto his face when he saw her. "Good evening, Rias. Couldn't sleep?" Unfortunately not. Rias shook her head as she finished walking down the stairs and moved over to the couch he was sitting on. "I thought you were training eyes?" "I am," Naruto told her, making her blink. "How could you be training eyes if you're here? And just where is eyes anyway?" Naruto opened his mouth to answer, "Oh God. Make it stop, make the pain stop. Bawahahaha. Run you scurvy perv. Run, bawahahaha." When a shrill yell of imaginable horror and pain made itself known along with what sounded like the insane laughter of the damned accompanying it. "Issei is currently training with my clone," Naruto informed the red-haired beauty, who was looking around for the source of the scream in worry. It was so loud she couldn't tell where it had come from. Clone? She shook her head and stepped behind him to see what he was doing. It looked like he was writing something. Hundreds of strange squiggles lined the paper in conjunction with a very old dialect of kanji. The squiggles looked like they were forming some kind of pattern, a spiral perhaps? It's one of my abilities, he elaborated. Rias watched as he set the brush down and brought his hands into a seal that looked similar to a cross. He muttered a quick, shadow clone jutsu, and Rias watched on in surprise when a burst of smoke appeared to her left. When the cloud dissipated, it was to reveal a perfect replica of the blonde sitting on the couch. The clone gave a cheeky grin, blew her a kiss, then dispelled. It's a chakra-based ability. Ninjutsu. What I do is split my chakra evenly. The half that was split is used to make a corporeal copy of myself. What an incredible ability. Rias could only marvel at how useful such a thing was, especially if he could make more than one. They're not very strong, Naruto added as an afterthought. One good hit will cause them to dispel, and right now I only have enough chakra to make 5, so I have to use it sparingly. They're mainly used for reconnaissance and stealth operations. Rias nodded as she listened to him, curious to learn more about his abilities. She had heard of chakra, of course, but generally it was a type of energy found in yokai, not humans. How Naruto could use chakra was beyond her. So what's this? Asked Rias, gesturing towards the strange symbols he had drawn. She had to admit, Naruto had great calligraphy. Each stroke of the brush appeared to be masterfully done, reminding her of some of the greatest calligraphists she had read about in her history class. I asked Akeno about what she knew of the Phenex clan's power, he said. She told me how they're able to regenerate near instantly from even fatal wounds. This, he gestured, is my attempts at trying to create a seal that will take away that healing ability. Sealing can do that? Asked Rias, amazing. Sealing is nearly limitless in its application, Naruto told her, paraphrasing something Jiraiya once said to him many years ago. A true master of sealing can seal away anything. Items, power, elements, you name it. With seals, one could even seal away certain aspects of the world, like time for instance, or alter the very reality upon which the world was built. I never knew such a powerful technique existed, Rias whispered in awe. Can you do that? Seal away time? Ha 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 ha. No, Naruto shook his head as he laughed a bit. I'm just a novice in sealing. My godfather taught me what he could, but we had focused more on my fighting potential than seals. I see. Do you think you can do it, then? Seal away Riser's ability to regenerate. Maybe. Naruto bit his lip as he studied the sheets in front of him. It's hard to say. Sealing is all about finding the right combination of kanji and combining them with various symbols and lines of power in order to seal something away. In some ways, sealing is almost like its own language. For example, if I wanted to seal a specific item, the kanji would have to be something like, to seal a steel broadsword of 54 inches in length and weighing 5 kilograms, or something like that. In order to seal Riser's ability to regenerate, I have to come up with the right combination of kanji and combine them with the correct symbols of power and various lines that will direct the flow of that power into the seal. It sounds pretty complicated, Rias said honestly as she slid next to him on the couch, placing her own documents on the table. It is, Naruto agreed, and unfortunately, the only thing I'm positive is correct about this seal are the symbols. He pointed to 2 very specific shapes that Rias would recognize anywhere, even if the kanji used was really old. Fire and wind. Yes. Because Riser is from the Phenex clan, he specializes in fire and wind. They are his elements. Thus, if I want to seal his regeneration, I need to seal his elements. I'm sure you'll come up with something, Rias told him. He looked at her and she smiled. I have faith in you. Thank you, Naruto offered a smile of his own before gesturing towards the folder. So what's that? This is Riser's official rating game record, Rias said, putting her glasses on before opening the folder and grabbing the sheets inside. She turned to Naruto to show him the records, only to blink as she found him snickering at her. What? She frowned. What's so funny? An amused smile touched Naruto's lips. What's with the glasses? Rias blushed. I feel like wearing glasses helps me think better, okay. She mumbled. Naruto chuckled, causing her face to heat up. I'm not making fun of you or anything, I think it's cute. Her face heated up some more. You do? Oh yes, Naruto nodded sagely. You're very attractive in glasses. You give off that sexy librarian vibe I remember reading about in this book once. Issei librarian. A classic. Why he didn't get into his godfather's literature until later on in life Naruto would never know. And here I thought you weren't a pervert, Rias muttered slyly. I'm not. Then what you? A healthy and virile young male. Rias' lip quirked upwards. Isn't that the same thing? No, Naruto shook his head. A pervert is someone who shamelessly peeks on women, whether that's looking up their skirts on the train ride or peeking on them when they're changing in the girls' locker room. They have no respect for a woman's privacy in their quest to see a nice pair of tits. So, like eyes then? Yes, like eyes, Naruto nodded. I, on the other hand, would not peek on women while they're changing, bathing, or getting dressed. You stare at me when I'm getting dressed plenty. And you get dressed right in front of me, Naruto shot back. I would also like to add that you're the one who sneaks into my room at night and snuggles into my bed naked. Would you rather I not? I didn't say that. This light-hearted banter continued on for some time before Naruto decided to switch topics. So what are we looking at? Nothing good, Rias sighed, knowing exactly what he was talking about. Riser's been in 10 official games. Of those games he only has 2 losses to his 8 wins, and those losses were on purpose as favors towards certain clans for past services rendered. He's essentially won every single game he's played. Of course, the reason he won isn't due to the strength of his peerage, but rather his immortality. She narrowed her eyes. Really, that's what it comes down to. He uses his servants to gauge the strength of the people facing him. Then once all his members are defeated, he uses his immortality granted to him as a phoenix to overwhelm them. I knew a guy kind of like that once, Naruto said thoughtfully. He didn't have any regenerative powers or anything, but he was immortal. Really? Oh yes. I remember how hard it was to beat him. You could chop his head off and he'd still come after you. Nothing we did seemed capable of bringing him down. So how did you beat him? Blow him up and bury his remains in a hole, Naruto said bluntly. Rias' sweat dropped. I was wondering, Rias, I know you don't like that Riser guy much. Honestly, I just met him and I can already tell he's a douchebag in need of a good ass kicking. But your dislike of him seems so much more personal. Naruto looked at the girl who had given him a purpose again, his azure eyes meeting her bluish green. Is it because of the marriage contract? Rias sighed. Her lips turned down and her eyes seemed to dim in sorrow as she remembered why she hated Riser. It's because he only sees me as a gremmery. She brought her knees up to her chest and looked down at the table. No matter where I go, the gremmery name always seems to follow me. I get it, Naruto said in sudden realization. Even though you're proud to be the heir of the Gremmery clan, you feel like you're trapped by the clan name. Everywhere you go it's Gremmery this, or Gremmery that, or heir to the Gremmery household. Everyone only ever sees you as Rias Gremmery, not just Rias. When Riser looks at you, he only sees the Gremmery clan heiress. Naruto looked at Rias, grinning widely as she gave what she was sure was an expression of dumb amazement. Am I right? Yes. Rias breathed, shocked. How did you know? I knew someone like you once. Naruto smiled with a hint of nostalgia. He was a little boy by the name of Konohamaru. His grandfather had named him after the village we lived in, Konohagakure no Saito. The village hidden in the leaves? Rias raised an eyebrow. Your village sure makes up some unusual names. Oi, don't be dissing on my home village's name, Naruto scowled in mock anger, causing Rias to giggle. The blonde dropped his scowl and grinned before continuing. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, Konohamaru. I bet you think it's an odd name, right? One that would be easily recognizable? Rias nodded. And it was, but no one ever remembered his name. Everyone always called him, Honorable Grandson. This is because Konohamaru was the grandson of the third Hokage, one of our most celebrated village leaders, who ended up retaking the position after the fourth died. So in spite of his name being something that people should remember out of principle, it being such a weird name and all, no one even knew it. All they saw was the grandson of the honorable grandson of the third Hokage. So what happened to this boy? He wanted people to remember who he was, and decided the only way to do that was to step out from underneath his grandfather's shadow. He decided that he was going to become Hokage, and he worked tirelessly towards that goal. Day in and day out he trained for the sole purpose of becoming the village leader so people would stop looking at him as the honorable grandson and start seeing him as Konohamaru. Did he ever become Hokage? I don't know, Naruto shrugged helplessly. I left the village when he was just a brat. By now, He's probably only around 14 or so. Oh, Rias sighed. You seem disappointed with my story, Naruto observed. No, it was a good story. I was just hoping for something more. Like, Rias gave a wistful smile. Oh, you know, something like Konohamaru triumphing over all the odds by succeeding in becoming Hokage, or something to that effect. Her smile left and she sighed. I guess I was hoping to hear something that would let me know that what I want isn't hopeless. That maybe, just maybe, I can get people to see me for who I am and not what house I come from. In response to her words, Naruto reached out with a hand, and flicked her ear. Ouch! Rias rubbed her ear and cast him a mild glare. What was that for? For being stupid, Naruto told her. Rias gawked at him. I feel like you've forgotten all about me. Huh? It was not the most elegant statement she had ever made, but then, she was confused. Some slack must be given in this instance. Naruto rolled his eyes. I don't care if your last name is Gremory. I wouldn't care if your last name is Phenex either. To me, you've always been Rias, the girl who found me when I was just going through the motions and gave me a new purpose in life. He gave her a smile that reached his eyes. And let me tell you, that Rias is pretty damn awesome. It was probably one of the only times Rias had ever felt herself become this speechless before. For the longest time she had searched for someone who would see her as just Rias. Not Rias Gremory, or even Bucko, simply Rias, with no titles or last names attached. Even if it was just one person, she wanted to find someone who would see her for who she was rather than what she was. She had almost given up hope. And here was a boy whom she had rescued from death, who told her that he saw her as Rias, that he saw her. That he didn't see the titles attached to her name, or the famous clan that came with being who she was. That he didn't care about what she was, but rather who she was. That he liked just Rias. Thinking on it, Naruto had always called her by her name. He never called her Bucko like the others, never called her by her last name. Because in his eyes, the only thing that mattered was Rias the person, not the clan heir or the club president. Rias felt her face warm up. A heat like never before spread across her cheeks. She was sure her face had reached a shade of red never before seen on her or any being, be they devil or otherwise. Her heart began beating faster. It felt like a war drum was pounding a frantic beat in her chest. Her breath hitched in her throat and her chest felt like it was about to burst. And as these things happened, Rias began to wonder. It had not even been a month since Naruto joined her peerage. He was still such a mystery, perhaps even more so than ever before with all the new discoveries she was making about him. It shouldn't have been possible to feel this way for someone she had just met, someone she had only known for a grand total of 3 weeks. Yet the feelings in her heart were undeniable. Rias was falling in love with Uzumaki Naruto. Cat CHRP. The rest of the training period passed by in a blur. Naruto helped Kaneko by sparring with her once she had gotten used to the sealed weights. They had decided not to take them off even though her training had come to an end, and instead have him teach her how to deactivate the seals so she would be able to catch her opponent off guard. As a devil, Naruto figured she should be capable of withstanding the intense weight of the seals, and it worked out well since she was the only one aside from him who could use chakra. Issei's training was going as well as could be expected. He wasn't progressing by leaps and bounds, but that was okay. Everyone moved at their own pace. The important thing was that a late-night talk Naruto had with the boy after one particularly violent beating had inspired Issei to do better. Rias did not know what was said, but the results from it were more than obvious. Naruto had no clue how Asia's or Akino's training went. He wasn't as good of friends with them as he was with Kaneko. Asia hung out with Issei most of the time and Akino tended to do her own thing. Kiba did as well, but Naruto wasn't sure he needed any training, at least, not in his knight abilities. The few spars they had together showed that the boy knew how to play to his strengths well. His late-night talks with Rias continued. After their first heart-to-heart, they had taken to meeting in the living room, just sharing stories about their childhood. Naruto told her about the pranks he had played and how he had always been getting into trouble at the academy. Rias had a good laugh at some of his stories and shared some of the things she had done when she was younger. Of course, Naruto did not neglect his own training either. He just trained farther away from the others. Much farther away. He didn't want anyone getting caught in one of his techniques. Naruto felt like he had just finished running 400 miles without stopping for food, water or rest. His body hurt in places he didn't even know could hurt. His legs felt like lead and his arms were probably broken in several places. Not to mention his knuckles looked like they had been shattered by that last punch he did. None of that mattered. Grinning as he ignored the pain caused by raising his arm to keep the sweat gathering on his brow from falling into his eyes, Naruto looked at the gigantic crater in the ground before him. A crater that was over 5 meters across. A crater that he had made with his own hand. It was strange. Despite the amount of effort he put into learning the secret to Tsunade's and Sakura's super strength, he had been unable to get it right. No matter how hard he worked, he just couldn't get the proper amount of chakra necessary to use the strength technique. He always ended up causing the tenketsu on his knuckles to burst in a most painful manner. However, Naruto had always been an unconventional fellow, and from his many failed attempts, he'd managed to create something just as good. Well, maybe not just as good, but pretty damn close. It would not be ready in time for the fight with Riser. Unfortunately, the technique was too unstable and did more damage to him than it was worth. That was okay though. He had other aces up his sleeves. One day he would master this new ability, and then he would use it to push his way onto the path of becoming the strongest devil in the world. No, the entire universe. Ha. I did it. I finally did it. Grinning, the young man with spiky blonde hair and sky blue eyes pointed a single finger up at the sky above. Just you guys wait. With this technique, I'll become the strongest devil ever. Datbeo, I'm gonna. His eyelids started to droop, along with his shoulders. I'm gonna go to sleep now. Exactly 1 second later, Naruto fell backwards. He didn't even stir as his head smacked against hard, tightly packed dirt. Not even a groan. Uzumaki Naruto slept the day away in a large 5-meter crater. Rias would be very displeased when he showed up 10 hours later, looking like someone had buried him alive. Chapter 8. The Rating Game. Naruto stood by the open window in his room, staring out at the moon. Ever since the Fourth Shinobi War, the moon had been a bad omen to him. A sign of possible destruction. The symbol of the ambitions of a man who very nearly destroyed everything he held dear. The reason he had been so helpless since coming to this world. Still, even though he hated the moon, even one such as him could not help but find the scene before him beautiful. Gentle beams of silver moonlight caressed the earth below, bathing the small cityscape of apartment buildings and convenience stores in an iridescent light. It was a tranquil sight, calming and gentle. The calm before the storm. 1 hour to go. A red light alerted Naruto to the use of a magic circle in his room. He did not turn around to see who it was. It was obvious that she would come here sooner or later. This would be their last chance to speak before the rating game commenced. I'm guessing all the preparations for the rating game have been made? Yes, the feminine, lovely voice of Rias came from behind him. He heard footsteps draw closer before a beautiful figure with crimson locks of hair falling around her body like an undying flame appeared in the left-hand corner of his eye. All the preparations for the rating game have been made. All that's left to do now is for us to go over there. Naruto gave a non-committal nod. Are you nervous? A little, Rias admitted quietly. This is the first rating game I've ever played in, and our opponent is someone who has never lost without intending to. To top it off, if we don't win. She trailed off, not wanting to even speak of what would happen if they lost. There was no need to anyways. Naruto knew what was at stake. It's okay to be nervous, Naruto told her. We all get a case of jitters during our firsts. I remember the first time I ever saw combat. A mildly self-depreciating chuckle escaped his lips. I was so frightened that I ended up having to be saved by my jackass of a teammate. I don't think I've ever felt so humiliated before or since. Rias smiled at his attempt at brevity, though the frown soon returned. She looked back out the window, her lower lip getting worried between her teeth. Do you think we can win? It was a testament to how much his opinion meant to her that she would ask that. None of the other members of their peerage, except for maybe Akano, had ever seen this side of her. The vulnerable side that needed to be reassured by someone else. All they ever saw was the strong and confident Rias who never backed down and treated her peerage like family. Naruto felt privileged to know that he was one of the few who would ever get to see this side of the normally strong woman. Naruto turned away from the view out of his window so that he could look more fully at the woman beside him. He contemplated her for a moment, not saying anything. In return, Rias did not speak. She knew him well enough by now to know that he was consciously choosing his words. It just took a while for him to actually speak because Naruto had a really bad tendency to blurt out the first thing that came to mind. "Do you trust me?" he finally asked. Rias just looked at him with wide eyes, as if she had not anticipated him asking such a question. "Of course I trust you." It was almost surprising how quickly the answer came from her lips. Even though she was caught off guard by the question, she still answered without a second's hesitation. There was just something about Naruto that made her feel like she could trust him with anything. "This may come as a surprise, but out of all the people in my peerage, it is you that I trust the most." And it was a surprise, but mostly to Rias. She shouldn't have been so shocked, she knew. Hadn't she spent nearly every waking moment with Naruto since reincarnating him? Despite this fact, the amount of faith she had in him still came as a great surprise. Perhaps a part of that was due to her. When he'd first became a member of her peerage, Rias had been intrigued. She wanted to learn more about this mysterious figure who seemed so open and yet so distant and enigmatic at the same time. He'd become a mystery she wanted to solve. To that end, she had spent more time with Naruto than anyone else in an effort to unravel the person behind those bright blue eyes. In hindsight, it was only natural that she would end up trusting him more than anyone else. He was just the kind of person that people who really knew him placed their trust in. Despite being a little rough around the edges, Naruto was a person who gave his all for the people he cared about. And he cared about her. For her to do any less than give him her absolute trust was an insult to him. She wouldn't do that. Not to him. "Then trust me when I tell you that we will win," Naruto told her. There was a small smile on his face. Nothing at all like his normal, large grins. This one was softer, more real. "All of us have trained hard for this moment. Each member of your peerage stands behind you, dedicated to winning this game so you don't have to marry that jerk. Trust in those who serve you and they will never let you down." His blue eyes stared into her own green-blue orbs intently. "I will never let you down. I believe in you," Rias whispered, causing Naruto's large, almost cheesy-looking grin to appear on his face. "As you should," he nodded, his chest puffing. "I'm completely awesome. There's no way I'd lose to some peacock who likes to shoot flames out of his ass." He then proceeded to smash the fist of his left hand into the open palm of his right. A resounding smack echoing throughout the room. "I live for kicking the ass of self-righteous pricks like him." Wasn't that the truth? His entire career was made from him kicking the ass of assholes. Kiba during the Chunin exams. Neji back when he was a prick in the finals. Gaara before he became cool. Kabuto even though he got his ass kicked as much as he kicked ass during that battle. Still, he hit that sucker good when he surprised the douchebag by completing the Rasengan. Every single battle he fought had been a battle against some kind of self-righteous douche who thought they could do whatever the hell they wanted because they were strong. Assholes. Every one of them. Risers going down. Rias giggled at the blonde's antic. In response, Naruto's grin widened, not just showing his pearly whites, but also stretching from ear to ear and making his eyes squint and his whiskers stretch. It was actually a rather endearing look, even if Rias thought he looked kind of goofy. Feeling bold, she walked up to him and pressed her body against his. Her arms came up and wrapped around his torso, pulling her body even closer, so close she could feel her bosom pushing against his pectorals. She tucked her head underneath his chin, her nose resting against his collarbone and allowing her to inhale his comforting scent. Earth and ramen. Strange, but somehow comforting, don't ask why. Rias? Naruto sounded confused, which he was. Even if this was not the first time they had shared an intimate moment together, the circumstance between now and then were different. Actually, now that he was thinking about it, it really was just like Rias to randomly hug him. Satan knows did it often enough, hugging him, that is. Hearing his voice caused Rias to press herself deeper against him. With her cheek now resting directly over his heart, she could hear the steady thump, thump of his heartbeat along with the comforting warmth she had come to associate with Naruto. And much like his warmth, the sound of his beating heart gave her solace. "Let me stay like this until we have to leave," she murmured softly. Her eyes involuntarily closed as she allowed Naruto's presence to encompass her. "Sure. We've got time enough for this." The muscles of Naruto's chest rippled before his arms came up and wrapped around her. His warmth engulfed her, making Rias feel secure in ways she had not felt since she was a child. It was different from the way she felt when her father or brother held her, better, but it was still similar enough that her mind drew up a comparison between now and those simpler times. Nuzzling her face against his chest, Rias sighed, content, feeling that if only she could stay like this for the rest of her life, everything would be better. Too bad life sometimes has a way of getting in the way of such things. Cat CHRP, they were all there. The entirety of Rias' peerage had gathered in the clubroom. Each of them was doing their own activities to help them keep calm, or as calm as possible, as the time before the rating game continued ticking down. Rias sat behind her desk, eyes closed, elbows propped on the wooden surface and hands clasped together in front of her face. She was the picture perfect of calm, at least on the outside. On the inside she was a boiling pot of anxiety and emotion. Standing beside her was the ever-faithful and sadistic Akeno, who appeared unusually tense despite the serene smile on her face. Over by the pair of couches that surrounded the coffee table was the bulk of Rias' peerage. Kiba was checking his blades, even though he knew they were perfectly sharp because he had made them with his sacred gear. Asia and Issei sat together, the blonde nun sitting as close to Issei as possible without actually holding onto him. She looked about ready to climb onto the boy's lap in her desire to receive some comfort. Meanwhile, Issei was clenching his pants with his fists, a nervous look on his face. On the other couch was Naruto and Kaneko. Despite them having the couch to themselves, the two were sitting even closer together than Asia and Issei. Which would make sense considering Kaneko actually was sitting on Naruto's lap. The cute, white-haired first year had her rear plopped on Naruto as she tightened the straps on her black and pink fighting gloves. As she turned her left hand over, the hardened leather surface along the knuckles gleamed slightly in the lighting of the room. While hard leather would not be as damaging as, say, brass, they would still increase the amount of damage dealt with each blow. Sometimes that was all the difference between victory and defeat. The fact that they were covered in seals to increase their durability and damage potential notwithstanding. The gloves had been a gift from Naruto. He had given them to her just a little while ago and she wanted to make sure they looked perfect. While she did this, Naruto had his arms wrapped securely around her waist and his chin was resting on the crown of her head. Unlike the other members of Rias' peerage, who were doing something to keep themselves busy, he was not. Instead he sat there, eyes closed and breathing so slow that it was only thanks to her enhanced hearing that Kaneko knew he was still among the living. The atmosphere was definitely apprehensive. Nail-biting even. Everyone knew that in just a few short minutes they would all be fighting in their first ever rating game, one in which the stakes were far higher than they could have ever expected. Their president's livelihood was on the line. That was a lot of pressure to put on a group of newbies. Needless to say, the tension was more than thick enough to cut with a knife. Not even Naruto was willing to break this silence, suspenseful as it was. Brevity would not help them here. Only by confronting their anxiety head-on would any of these people in this room be able to move forward. And if they couldn't, well, better that he not give them a false hope by making claims he couldn't keep like he used to do as a child. Naruto had plenty of confidence in himself, but he couldn't carry the whole peerage on his own, nor would he. Naruto wasn't their babysitter. Bucko? Issei broke the stillness that pervaded the room. Rias opened her eyes and looked at him. What is it, Issei? I was just thinking about this, but you mentioned having two bishops. Why isn't your other one here? Kiba's and Kaneko's expressions turned grave. Akeno did not react outwardly, but even her demeanor seemed to shift, looking a little more downtrodden than before. Rias sighed. She did not like to think about her other bishop. Not because of anything her bishop had done, but rather, because being reminded of her bishop reminded Rias of her own shortcomings and failure as a king. Unfortunately, my other bishop will not be participating in this round. I will explain his situation eventually, but not now. Whether Issei would have responded or not became a moot point when the ground of the clubroom lit up with silver light. A magic circle appeared on the floor, from which Graphia emerged, looking as composed as she always did. There are only 10 minutes left until the battle starts, she informed them. Have all of you finished your preparations? When everyone nodded, she continued. Please remember that the great devil, Lucifer-sama, will be observing the battle. Rias raised an eyebrow. She also looked more than a little annoyed. Oh, so my dear Oni-sama is going to watch us, then? Issei looked confused. Oni-sama? The president's older brother is none other than the Demon King. The great Mao. Lucifer-sama. Kiba supplied helpfully. Thanks for stating the obvious. What? Issei's reaction was very much an overreaction. But I thought Bucko was from the Gremory household. The original Demon King died during the war between the three factions. Naruto informed a surprised Issei, who did not know Naruto had this knowledge. Rias was just as surprised as well. However, the devils need their king, thus, it was decided that the devil with the greatest strength would be crowned the new Demon King. The one given the title of Mao is considered the strongest alive, having succeeded the four founding Maos: Lucifer, Beelzebub, Leviathan and Asmodeus. So, basically, what you're saying is that Bucko's brother was chosen as the next Demon King. More or less, Naruto gently rubbed his hands up and down Kaniko's arms, earning a pleased noise from the girl in question. Thanks to his sensing abilities he could feel her anxiety, and his comforting chakra was enough to ease at least some of that. Sears's Lucifer, the Crimson Satan, is Rias' brother. Akeno smiled as she held a hand to her cheek. It seems you've been paying attention to all those lectures I gave you. Of course, Naruto smiled at the sadist. Your help was invaluable. I'm so pleased. Wait, Rias furrowed her brow as she looked between her queen and Naruto. What do you mean you've been giving him lectures? Kitsune-kun asked me to teach him more about the underworld and its history, Akeno said pleasantly, her eyes opening very slightly as she gave Rias a challenging smirk. He looked so cute and delectable, practically on his hands and knees, begging me to help him. The buxom ravenette actually shuddered, a soft moan escaping her throat. Both Issei and Asia blushed at the noise, while Rias and Kaniko glared at the girl. I simply couldn't refuse him. When Rias glared at her, the lightning priestess' smile widened. Jealous? Hardly. Rias grit her teeth. Still, why didn't he simply come to me instead of you? Because I prefer talking to you about non-devil related things, Naruto answered for her. I enjoyed talking to you as a man would to a woman, not a student to a teacher. Rias' cheeks became suffused with color. Akeno saw this and giggled, placing her cheek in her hand. Kitsune-kun is such a romantic. I think I'm beginning to feel a tad envious of my king. She looked over at Naruto and licked her lips sensuously. Would you ever consider having an affair with me? As Rias once more returned to glaring at her queen, Naruto chuckled. Kind of hard to have an affair when I'm not dating anyone at the moment. Being the still slightly oblivious idiot that he was, Naruto did not notice Rias wilt slightly at the comment. He did feel Kaniko's shoulder slump, but assumed she was just relaxing into his embrace. Besides, he gave the Yamato Nadeshiko a challenging look. I'm not sure you would be able to handle me. Oh, I can handle you alright. Akeno's smile matched Naruto's almost to a T, almost because her smile was tinged with just a touch of what could only be described as sadism. And yes, sadism is a facial expression. I just might break you in the process. Okay, that's enough you two, Rias snapped. We don't have time for you to be flirting. Akeno smiled pleasantly. Sounds like someone is jealous. Rias glared at her second in command. Thankfully, before the situation could degenerate further, Graphia stepped in. The time is near. Everyone, please step into the magic circle where you will be transported to the arena that the rating game is taking place in. Everyone got up and walked into the glowing red circle that appeared on the ground. Naruto kept one hand on Kaniko's shoulder as Rias walked up to him. She did not do anything, but she was still closer to him than everyone barring the small, white-haired first year. There was a flash of light before Naruto and the others became suffused in color. Their forms dissolved only to reform seconds later as they found themselves standing exactly where they had been before. What the? Issei looked around in confusion. We're still in the clubroom. Did the spell not work? Greetings everyone. The familiar voice of a certain maid sounded from the speakers. I am Graphia, a servant of the Gremory family. I have been charged with the honor of refereeing the match between Riser Phenex and Rias Gremory. Please note that my master, Sears's Lucifer-sama, will also be observing this match. After taking in the opinions of both Riser-sama and Rias-sama, we have decided to use a replica of Ko Academy, the school that Rias-sama attends in the human world, as the battlefield. What does she mean by replica? Asked Issei. Take a look outside. Issei looked at Rias oddly for a moment, but soon followed her advice, opening one of the shutters that kept the window closed. What he saw would forever be engraved in his mind. The ground of Ko Academy looked the same as always. The beautifully crafted Western-style building sat in the middle of a grassy field surrounded by a fence, lush trees and more buildings. Everything looked exactly as it always had. Except for one difference. The sky. It was completely white. As far as the eye could see, stretching across for miles, was a pure white sky. It didn't even look like a sky, just a blank canvas that God had forgotten to paint on when he made the world. That sky shows that we are in an alternate dimension created by devils to host the rating game. Impressive, Naruto whistled as he took a look outside as well. Creating an alternate dimension is very difficult, at least for humans. That devils can do so and make it look so realistic like this is pretty damn amazing. Does that mean there are humans who can create alternate dimensions? Asked a curious Kiba. Some, Naruto answered, but it's a very rare ability, most often limited to those with bloodlines, or genetic traits that are carried through the blood. The Sharingan had been particularly good at creating alternate realities. It had also been Obito's specialty. Both parties have now been transferred to their respective strongholds, came Graphia's voice once more. Rias Sama's team is in the Occult Research Club room. Riser Sama's team is in the Student Council room. To promote your pawns, you will have to proceed to the opponent's stronghold. Naruto, Rias grabbed the blonde Uzumaki's attention. She held out her hand, showing a small earbud resting on her palm. This is a communicator. It will allow everyone to keep in touch at all times. Thanks, Naruto said as he put his hand in hers. It lingered for a moment longer than necessary before he grabbed the communicator and put it in his ear. So all I need to do in order to get promoted to queen is enter the new schoolhouse. Issei pounded a fist into his open palm. Then I can become the strongest piece in the game. He was so ready for this. After all the tour training he had been through, there was no way he could lose now. This was his moment, his time to shine. Just you wait, harem, he was coming. Era, you make it sound so simple. Naruto responded to Issei's words much more bluntly than a Kano. He smacked the boy in the back of the head, causing the poor pervert to nearly fall flat on his face as he stumbled forwards. Ouch, don't think it will be that easy, eyes, Naruto chided the boy. You have to remember that in order to get to the new schoolhouse, you will more than likely have to go through at least several of the douchebag's servants, each of which will most likely be a bishop, knight, or rook. They'll be guarding against intrusion. You also have to remember that Riser's pawns will also be trying to enter our territory, Kiba added. And seeing how Riser's got a full set, it means we'll have to deal with 8 pawns as opposed to our one that he'll have to take care of. A cloud of depression formed around Issei. Asia took a weary step back as black steamers leaked out of his body like a gas line that had been perforated. I see your point. Don't worry too much, Naruto grinned, slapping the boy hard enough on the back to make him stumble. Issei glared at the blonde, who pretty much ignored it. Rias has likely got a plan for dealing with the douche's harem. He also ignored the way Issei began crying at the mention of Riser's harem. Have a little faith in her just like she does in you, alright? At the mention of their president, everyone turned to Rias, who had taken to sitting behind the desk. Our first task will be to take out Riser's pawns, she told them. He has 8 of them, and it will be problematic if he manages to promote one of them, much less all 8 of them, into queens. You seem awfully calm about all this. Issei mumbled, obviously not seeing how someone could stay so calm when they were on the cusp of a battle that would determine more than just who won and who lost. Rias was fighting with her hand in marriage on the line. How could anyone be calm with that kind of pressure on them? The battle has just started, Rias said, sipping at a cup of tea that Akano had prepared for her. Rating games like these tend to take a long time. There is no point in worrying right now when we have only just begun. As she spoke, Naruto walked up to the desk and placed a sheet of paper, which displayed a map of the school, on it. It was a very simplistic map, using different colored blocks to represent sections of the academy. The enemy base is the new school building, Rias began, pointing out the large block that represented the building in question. She then began moving her finger across the board until it was pointing at a patch of yellow. Going through the quad is the fastest route to get there, however. It's in clear view of the new school building, Kaneko pointed out. Yes, Rias nodded, and because of that, the risks are far too great to go through there. Then maybe we should go through the track and field grounds behind the new school building, Issei suggested. A sound idea, but one the enemy is likely expecting, Naruto spoke up. I wouldn't be all that surprised if they stationed both knights and rooks at that clubhouse right there. He pointed towards the orange block with the word clubhouse written on it. Kitsune-kun brings up a good point. Akeno sounded a lot more serious than usual. That's a very obvious first move. We would be walking into a trap. Bucko, Kiba got everyone's attention. We could get closer to the new school building by going through the gymnasium. Perhaps we should head there first. His index finger landed on the 2 purple squares that had the word gymnasium written inside of them. It's close to our base, and at the same time, we can gather more information on our enemy. Intelligence on our enemy is something we're lacking right now, Naruto informed Rias. As someone who'd been apprenticed to a former spy master, the young Uzumaki was well aware of how the information game worked. He just tended to act like he was ignorant and stupid because it made people underestimate him. And it was more fun. Information is something we'll need if we want to have any hope of fleshing out a plan. Rias considered all the thoughts being given to her. In chess terms, the gym is at the center of the board. The first side who takes control of it will certainly have an advantage. She leaned over the desk. It's decided then. However, I think a powerful rook, rather than an agile knight, would be best suited for this test. In an enclosed space, a heavy hitter will definitely have an advantage, Naruto agreed. This war seems very difficult. This isn't war, Naruto said. Although he spoke quietly, everyone heard him. Naruto? Rias looked at her servant in worry. There was something about the expression on his face that unnerved her. It reminded her of the night he had killed Donasek. This is nothing like a real war. Naruto closed his eyes. He managed to resist the urge to grit his teeth, but only just thinking about war and anything involved with the subject never failed to rile him up. War is hatred and pain, suffering and death. It's unspeakable atrocities and unimaginable horrors. This, Naruto snorted in derision, an act that was so not Naruto it actually scared the other peerage members. This is a farce compared to a true war. Naruto. 2 hands touched him. One slid into his hand, the other cupped his cheek. Naruto's eyes fluttered open to find Ria's beautiful greenish-blue irises staring at him in concern. A look out of the corner of his eyes showed Kaneko holding his hand. She was also looking up at him in worry. He squeezed Kaneko's hand reassuringly and smiled at them. Sorry you guys. I got a little sidetracked. Are you okay? Asked Rias, her thumb stroking one of the whisker marks on his cheek. She had found during the 10-day grace period that they were very sensitive and that just by touching them, Naruto would become putty in her hands. She had used this knowledge to great effect then, and it would serve her well here she was sure. Fine, Naruto leaned into Ria's hand, even going so far as to bring his free hand up to hold hers in place. The actor hand on his cheek, her thumb rubbing his whiskers, served to calm him down. Thank you. He let his thumb caress the back of Kaneko's hand. Both of you. Bastard, Issei muttered darkly. If looks could kill, the glare he threw at the spiky-headed blonde would have surely caused instant death. I suddenly have this incredible urge to strangle that blonde bastard. Hogging all Bucko and cute little Kaneko-chan's attention like that. Standing beside him, Asia took his hand. You shouldn't begrudge Naruto-san for something like that, Aiz-kun, she admonished him lightly. I guess. Issei's cheeks became stained red as Asia stared into his eyes. Fine, I won't strangle him. He pouted a bit. I'm still mad though. Asia's response to his words was to giggle. Era. Issei then stiffened and his face burst with color of the red variety when a pair of large, bouncy opie were pressed into his back. To go along with the ginormous melons smashing into him from behind. A pair of arms went around his neck. There, Aiz-kun. Akino's hot breath washed across his ear, making him shudder. There's no need to be jealous. Issei would have said something, but his brain had shut down. Asia just puffed up her cheeks as she glared at the Yamato Nadeshiko, tears gathering in her eyes. Moo. I don't want to be left behind by Akeno-senpai. Thus, she quickly pressed herself into Issei's front, making steam starting coming out of the boy's ears. Over in a corner, Yuto quietly pouted. He felt like a seventh wheel. After a few more seconds, Rias disengaged her hand from Naruto's cheek. She walked back over to the desk and faced her servants. Kaneko had not let go of Naruto's hand. To start things off, we need to protect our front line. Yuto, Kaneko, I want you to set some traps in the forest surrounding the clubroom. Yes, Bucko. Hi. Before Kaneko took off to do her assigned duty, Naruto stopped her. As she looked up at him with her large, amber eyes, the blonde carefully reached into her hair and found her ears. After her initial stiffening from the contact, the first-year student eventually relaxed and let out a soft purr. "You'll be careful out there, right?" asked Naruto. "Don't worry," Kaneko nuzzled her head against his eyes. "I'll be careful." "Alright then. Good luck." Rias frowned as she watched Naruto staring worriedly after Kaneko. She now knew why the amount of affection Naruto always showed her rook bothered her. While she would never admit it out loud, Rias was jealous of how close the two were. As far as she could tell, there was no discernible reason for their closeness. Kaneko and Naruto couldn't be more different from each other. Naruto was loud, brash, and obnoxiously cheerful. Kaneko was quiet and unobtrusive. Two such different people should not be able to get that close, at least not that close that quickly. And yet from the moment those two had met, a bond had been formed somehow, someway, even though no one could see why. Yeah, that bothered her a lot. She spent so much time trying to get close to Naruto, whereas Kaneko hadn't done a single thing and seemed to earn more affection from the whisker-marked blonde than everyone else in the room combined. How could that not bother her? Shaking her head in irritation, Rias dispelled those unhelpful thoughts and turned her head to look at her queen. Akeno, after the traps are set, cast some spells around the perimeter of the forest and in the sky. Very well, Akeno bowed before walking out of the room, leaving Asia, Issei, Naruto and Rias as the only members left. "I should get going too," Naruto informed them. "If I'm going to get my surprise for the Phenex douche ready, then I'm going to need time to prepare." "Oh, I see," Rias looked disappointed, but quickly drew herself up. Naruto's task was important, quite possibly the most important task of all. It was literally their ace in the hole. She knew that it was best he get started as soon as possible. He couldn't spend his time with her. "Good luck, Naruto, and please, be careful." Naruto offered her a smile. "Hey, it's me." He flashed her a grin and tossed her a wink before leaving the old school building. Rias watched him go, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of worry, concern, and faith. As the door closed behind her blonde servant, she sighed and sat down heavily in the chair. "That's what I'm afraid of. Cat CHRP. Naruto listened to the chatter over the communicator between his friends. It seemed they were all done setting traps, and Kaneko and Issei were now preparing to confront the enemy in the gymnasium. He wished them luck. And since the action was about to get started, that meant it was all the more imperative that he complete the first phase of his own task. Sneaking past all the guards outside of the new school building had been a cinch. None of them were ninja or even had remote sensing abilities. The new school building was pretty much empty. Obviously, that douchebag Riser had sent all of his pieces out to counter Rias' own peerage members. It was just as Rias said. Riser had so much confidence in the power behind his Phenex abilities that he had left himself exposed. Naruto would make sure to teach him the price of his hubris soon enough. He walked down the hall with stealth earned from years of pranking a village filled with shinobi. No noise came from his feet as they touched the ground. His movements were beyond silent, like a ghost. Instead of simply walking along the floor, it was more like he was gliding across it. Eventually, Naruto reached the room that would best suit his purpose. After closing the door behind him just in case Riser or one of his servants came down this way by chance, he walked further into the empty classroom and stood in its center. The first thing Naruto did was make exactly 4 clones. He winced as he felt the drain on his chakra. He had put a good deal of chakra into each clone, an estimate of 5 clones worth each, meaning he had just created an equivalent of 20 shadow clones. His limit was 30. Since they were him, they already knew their orders and quickly disappeared out of the room. Those clones were essential to his plan to beat Riser. Hopefully, they wouldn't get caught or his plan would be ruined before it could even begin and he would end up letting Rias down. He wondered how long it would take them to finish the hand seals for his newest jutsu. Part of the reason he had moved out so soon rather than stayed with Rias was because the jutsu had 156 seals needed to activate it. And as much as he didn't want to admit it, he sucked at doing hand seals. That was why all of his jutsu were simply variants of the Rasengan, which required no hand seals. Only the henge, sexy jutsu, shadow clones, and his water swords actually required hand seals. And they only required a single hand seal, so it wasn't like doing them was difficult. His clones would need a good deal of time if they were going to do all those hand seals correctly. Hopefully none of them would mess up. With his clones off on their assigned tasks, there was only one thing left for him to do. Sitting down in the center of the classroom, Naruto assumed the lotus position. His breathing slowed until his chest was practically still. His body stopped moving entirely. He was, for all intents and purposes, a statue. He didn't know how much senjutsu chakra he would be able to take in, but every little bit helped. Cat CHRP, there's the gym. Issei, Kiba, and Kaneko all saw the gymnasium looming overhead. It was a large, rectangular building with a rounded roof similar to a military barracks that housed soldiers. The walls were cream-colored and made of brick, while the roof was made from steel instead of tile. "I'll go on ahead while you two head inside," Kiba told them, getting a nod from both Issei and Kaneko. As the knight of their group sped away, the pawn and the rook made their way inside of the gym. "Man, this is a really good replica," Issei murmured as they stepped inside. It was dark, most of the lights were out, but he could still make out enough of the room to see that it looked exactly like the original gym it was made to resemble. It had everything his gym had. Even the items strewn about the inside looked just like all of the stuff Kuo Academy's gym possessed. "We can get up to the stage from here," Kaneko pointed to a set of stairs. Saying this, she walked up the stairs and towards the curtains that usually hid the stage from view. Issei followed her, but was forced to stop when Kaneko halted at the edge of the curtains and crouched down. "Kaneko-chan? There's someone here. The enemy. We know you're there, servants of Gremory." Not very good at stealth, these two. Since hiding was useless, the pair decided not to hide anymore. They walked further onto the stage, out into the open, and took note of the four standing below them. 3 pawns and a rook. Kaneko studied the four in great detail. "Issei-senpai, you get the pawns. I'll take on the rook." "Got it." Issei held up his arm. "Boosted gear, standby." "Boost. It's demolition time, Gia." Issei almost took a step back at the sound of a pair of chainsaws activating. The loud vroom that emitted from the 2 pieces of lawn equipment turned weapons damn near scared the crap out of him. And just what the hell were they doing wielding chainsaws anyways? Little girls should not be using such dangerous equipment. The duo holding the chainsaws were twins. They were a pair of very young-looking girls with turquoise hair, which they kept tied to one side with a yellow ribbon, and blue eyes. Both of their outfits consisted of a gym uniform. A pair of white t-shirts with blue accents, black leggings, and blue sneakers over knee-high socks. Their clothing was similar to the girls' Ko Academy gym uniform, only it did not have the logo. The loud thudding sound followed by a just as harsh snap let Issei know that Kaneko had engaged the rook. Despite his curiosity, he did not look at the battle. Blonde bastard sensei had told him to never let his eyes leave his opponents. During his training, every time he had looked away from that damn sadist, the blue-eyed Uzumaki would make sure he paid for it with blood and pain. If Issei didn't know any better, he would say that bastard took joy in his pain. And people said Akeno was the ultimate sadist. In either case, it was a damn good thing he refused to take his eyes off the ball, so to speak, because it meant he saw when one of the pawns moved. It was the one who had nearly done him in during the time when he and the other members of the peerage met Riser. His stomach was still smarting from when the quiet and unassuming girl knocked him through the ceiling with that damn stick of hers. She was another young girl. Her hair was a light blue in color and done up in 4 short ponytails, 2 of which were pointed up while the other 2 were pointed down. The front of her hair featured a split across the forehead, so her bangs framed her face. Her eyes were a light brown. Her clothing consisted of a white haori with a red obi, which was worn under a red happy coat. She had bandages on her forearms and shins, and wore black guards over her hands. For footwear, she was wearing a pair of zori. The girl, Issei couldn't remember her name, came in, swinging her wooden staff at his head. Issei stumbled backwards, falling on his rear as he just barely avoided the tip of the staff. He could actually feel the air ruffling his hair, it was so close. Continuing to press the attack, the staff-wielding pawn swung her weapon downwards. Her attack rent the air, a loud whistle accompanying her swing. Letting out a startled exclamation, Issei rolled over to his left, avoiding the attack that ended up hitting the ground instead. He scrambled to his feet just in time to be met with the chainsaw-wielding twins. "Let's tear him to pieces." What the hell was wrong with these two? They were so violent, talking about tearing him apart so joyfully. They came in at him from either side. A pincer attack, which meant he had two options, forwards or backwards. Issei did neither. Taking a quick step to his left, he dodged the downward slash of the crazy psycho chainsaw-wielding twin on the right. He took another step forward, allowing her to stumble past him as she tried to get over her surprise at missing. Issei then proceeded to smack the girl in the ass with a loud slap that resounded throughout the gym and caused all the fighting to stop on a dime. Issei looked a lot more thoughtful than someone should be after slapping a girl's ass. It's quite soft, but also kind of firm. Is this what they call a great ass? Boost. Oh, and I'm at level 2. Nice, that pervert. The girl whose ass he slapped just blushed. Eki, hentai, he just slapped my ass. Several feet away, Kaneko sighed as she and the rook she was fighting halted their own fight to face Palm and Gape respectively, perverted senpai. That does it. The one who didn't get her ass slapped growled as she revved up her chainsaw and charged at him. Issei, seeing the girl bum rushing him with her chainsaw held high overhead, did the only thing a man like him would do when faced with such a situation. Kya! He ran away screaming. Get back here, perverted baka. I'm going to chop you into pieces. I'll make mincemeat out of you. What soon followed was Issei dodging around various attacks made by the Chainsaw Sisters and the staff wielder. Unlike most people, who tended to try and dodge gracefully, Issei had no sense of grace at all. In fact, it would almost be more accurate to say he stumbled around like a blind man and the attacks coming at him just so happened to miss. A chainsaw set to bisect him was dodged when he tripped over his own 2 feet. He managed to tuck his body into a forward roll and come back up, which consequently allowed him to miss getting split in half as the other girl drove her piece of lawn hardware down, striking the floorboard with enough force to shatter and shred the wood into tiny wood chips. The whooshing sound of a staff alerted him to another attack. His body stumbled to the side as he spun around, just barely managing to dodge the blow by caving his stomach inwards. More and more attacks were dodged in the most unusual of ways until, several minutes later, the 3 pawns were left huffing and puffing. Ha! Damn it, why can't we hit him? This is so annoying. We can't seem to get past his guard. Boost, alright? Issei cheered as his gauntlet charged up another boost. Thank God he was finally charged up. All the dodging had been getting annoying. Time for level 3. He grinned at the chainsaw wielders. This is the end of the line for you too. Before the twins could even question the boy, Issei was in front of them. Kya! The one on the left was his first victim. With a quickness that surprised even himself, he thrust his hand out and hit the girl in the chest. He also managed to steal a quick grope, but that was besides the point. Her breasts may be small, but even though he preferred larger boobs, there was something to be said for the small ones too. How dare you do that to my sister? Turning his head, Issei saw the second chainsaw girl lashing out with her spinning buzzsaw of doom. He moved to the left, sticking out his foot. The girl, unprepared for him dodging so quickly, kept moving forward. She tripped over his foot and began falling to the ground, allowing Issei to smack her in the ass, again. What could he say? It was a very nice ass, ha-ah. Reacting to the loud shout, Issei turned in time to see the staff girl thrust her weapon forward. He took a step back, allowing the staff to zoom past him, then gripped the weapon with his gauntlet-covered hand. His other hand came down and struck the weapon, breaking it in half. Before the girl could get over her surprise at losing her weapon, Issei followed through with a strike to the girl's shoulder. A frown came to his face as the girl he sent flying backwards landed on her butt several feet away from the other 2 girls he had struck. He had meant to grab her boobs. Damn, how could his aim be so far off? He touched my butt. He touched my chest. He ignored the maniac twins, as he had come to think of them, and looked down at his hand in silent contemplation. That had been really easy. Before the training trip he wouldn't have even been able to keep up with the staff wielder. Now he was fighting her and the 2 maniac twins with ease. He wasn't even winded. Looks like all that training actually paid off. You're finished. Issei looked over to see Kaneko sitting on top of the rook she had been fighting, holding one of the woman's arms behind her back in a painful-looking grappling technique. The pained grimace on the other rook's face really only confirmed his thoughts. She's already beaten her opponent, as expected of Kaneko-chan. His grin looked positively lecherous as he turned his attention to the trio of pawns he had defeated. So then, shall I finish you girls off as well? Finish us off. No way we'll let you do that. Riser-sama would be pissed if we lost to a guy like you. We're definitely going to cut you up this time. The staff wielder didn't say anything. She was busy crying over her now broken staff. Foo. It's time for me to unleash my newest attack. For some reason that was beyond all those present, the perverted high schooler began going through several weird sentai poses. There didn't seem to be any reason for it, other than maybe personal enjoyment. That's your pawn? Despite being in pain, Riser's Rook looked up at Kaneko sympathetically. He's really stupid. Issei senpai is a perverted idiot. The boy in question didn't hear them, busy as he was making poses. Good thing too. Kaneko's words might have depressed him. Eat this. Issei held up his gauntlet-covered hand and snapped his fingers. Dress break. There was a loud tearing sound, followed by 3 sets of dismayed cries as all the girls he had defeated had their clothing ripped to shreds. Issei grinned, blood gushing out of his nose like a fire hydrant as he saw the unhidden female flesh. None of these girls were endowed like Rias or Akeno, but Naked Girl was Naked Girl, and Issei planned on enjoying this sinful view for as long as possible. Bawahahahaha. Issei's laugh was eerily reminiscent to those cliched evil villains found in anime. The now naked girls, hearing his laugh, glared up at him, their faces lighting up with the brilliance of 1,000 suns. How do you like that? That's my new only useful for stripping girls' clothes with my tiny bit of magic power special move, dress break. He held himself in a stance of victory, one hand on his hip, his other hand clenched into a fist and raised high into the air. As Issei allowed himself a chance to revel in his moment of victory, he recalled how this attack, this gloriously beautiful attack, was made possible. Cat CHRP. Issei was sent rocketing backwards with all the speed of a freight train as he was hit by a fist that seemed to pack more power than a rhino when it was in full rampage mode. His back crashed into several trees, tearing right through them like they were made of paper and compounding to the amount of pain he felt before his backwards momentum was finally stopped by a boulder that he hit. Even then, the boulder very nearly broke apart on him as he was slammed into it hard enough to crack it. He fell to the earth and ground, vomiting blood as he hacked and coughed. Issei had been through a lot in recent weeks. He'd been stabbed by spears of light, he'd had to deal with Ria's torture sessions under the guise of training, and he had fought against the likes of Kiba and Kaneko. None of that had been anywhere near as painful as what he felt right now. It was as if his body had been smashed by several boulders, like he had been tossed into the ocean with a lead weight keeping him down and sunk so low that the pressure literally crushed him. Issei was almost positive that nothing this world had to offer would hurt as much as getting punched by Uzumaki Naruto. Come on, Arrow Dabagame. That can't be all you have. Get up. Speak of the devil. Issei groaned as he tried to push himself to his feet, only to fall flat on his face once more. His arms had finally given out on him and now all he could do was lay stomach first on the ground, his face lying in a puddle of his blood. A sigh was heard above him. There's no way you can be finished. Issei, come on, give me one more round. I can't. Issei tried to shout, but it came out much softer than he wanted. His arms gave him enough strength to finally roll over so at least he wasn't inhaling the coppery scent of his own blood. Damn it. Yes you can. Naruto insisted. I refuse to believe that someone Rias has put enough faith in to sacrifice all 8 of her pawns is this worthless. Now get up. What's the point? Issei whispered, tears now beginning to stream down his face at the reminder that Rias believed in him. She believed in him and he was proving her faith had been misplaced. He couldn't hold his own against Kiba, he couldn't do magic to save his life, all Rias exercises exhausted him. Kaneko kicked his ass on a daily basis and even Naruto, another new addition to the peerage, was tossing him around like a rag doll. There's no way I can match up to any of you. Riser and the others were right. I've got nothing. I'm not fast like Kiba, or talented with magic like Asia. I don't have Kaneko's strength or your skill at fighting. I've got nothing. There was a long moment of silence. The only thing Issei could hear was the chirp of crickets and his own, panted breathing. The silence lasted for several seconds more before footsteps could be heard. Naruto came into view just a few moments later and sat down next to the rock Issei had been embedded in before falling to the ground. Issei, you may not be as fast as Kiba, as magically inclined as Akeno and Asia, as strong as Kaneko, or even as talented in combat as myself, but you have something that none of us have. Everyone has something that they are good at, something that makes them unique. You just have to find that something that you are good at. At Naruto's heartfelt words, Issei began to feel hope arise inside of him. Could the blonde really be right? Could he have a power that no one else did that would help him get stronger? Well, technically, he did, but he wasn't counting his boosted gear at the moment. Do you really think I have something I'm good at? Of course. I even know what it is. Really? Issei perked up, eager to hear what his talent is. What is it? You, Issei. Are a pervert. If Issei had not been lying down, he would have face planted. How is that supposed to help me? You obviously failed to understand your worth. Hyudu Issei, Naruto spoke with the utmost seriousness. Issei could not help but stiffen at the formal tone the blue-eyed devil used. I'm going to let you in on a little secret, one that only Rias knows. My sensei, the man who taught me everything I know and was considered one of the strongest people where I come from, a bona fide badass who had graduated with top grades in the art of ass-kickery, was the biggest pervert I have ever met in my life. Really? Issei's eyes widened to the point where they looked almost anime-ish. Really? Naruto nodded his head. He was a man whose lecherous intentions were so well known that even goddesses trembled at the mere mentioning of his name. He was an undying wanderer with an unquenchable lust for big breasts and tight butts. His title as a legendary sage with unquestionable power was only eclipsed by his infamy of perversity and legendary peaking habits. Issei, the blonde's voice was as serious as the young pervert had ever heard it. If my sensei can become a man who was hailed as one of the strongest people in my land, then you can become just as strong. Wow. Issei had really misjudged Naruto. All this time he had been cursing the blonde for being a bastard who stole Kaneko-chan and Bucko from his lustful intentions. But hearing the blonde speaking so highly of him, showing such confidence in him, really brought the truth home. Naruto just wanted him to be strong and had enough faith not to hold back. It almost made him want to cry. Do you really think I can be as strong as your sensei? Of course, Naruto smiled, standing up as Issei's muscles recovered enough that he could at least sit up, even though he had to lean against the rock to do so. And to help you become as strong as you can be, I'm going to give you something that my sensei left for me. A legacy that I sadly have not been able to follow, but one that I think you will be perfect for. After saying this, Naruto pulled out a small package wrapped in parasol paper. It didn't look like much, but the way the blonde held it so reverently told Issei it was very valuable. Go on, eyes, Naruto held it out to him. Take it. Feeling a sense of anticipation, Issei unwrapped the package to find a little orange book. It was a rather plain book, with a basic cover that held the image of a rather poorly drawn man chasing a just as poorly drawn woman. Icha Paradise, the title read. Curious as to what a book with a name like that could contain, as well as why Naruto thought it was so important, Issei opened the book. And when he did, angels began to sing and a golden light emitted from within the pages contained inside of the small object made of paper and bindings. Issei gasped in shock as he saw what was within those hallowed pages. Shock soon gave way to manly tears while at the same time blood began gushing out of his nose like Niagara Falls. This is perfection, Issei cried, his eyes staring at the book like it was the greatest invention since ever. And in his mind it was. Not even the most exclusive and top-rate porno mags and erotic movies could compare to this compilation of orgasmic fantasy. I've never seen something so beautiful in my entire life. The attention to detail, the amount of descriptions, the sex, the opie, it's so beautiful. My sensei was a great man, a shameless man, Naruto continued. He was a man whose lust knew no bounds and was willing to risk life and limb for the sake of seeing a beautiful pair of breasts. There were 2 legacies that he possessed, and because of certain circumstances, I was only to fulfill half of that legacy. I became a powerful warrior, but I was never able to earn the second title he possessed, and the one he was most proud of, the title of Super Pervert. The legendary Super Pervert. Issei stopped his crying long enough to look shocked. You mean he's real? I thought the tales of the legendary Super Pervert were only myths. No, they are very real, my friend. Naruto knelt down next to Issei and placed his hands on the other boy's shoulders. He also filed away the knowledge that Jiraiya's perversity had apparently been felt across dimensions. It didn't mean much, but it was definitely funny. Issei, take up the half of my godfather and sensei's legacy that I could not fulfill. Find your true calling as the legendary Super Pervert. I'll do it. Issei, once more crying tears that only a man can cry, clamped his hands over Naruto's. It was a total bromance moment, where two men bonded through their shared love of woman, perversion and opai. I'll take up your godfather's legacy, I'll become a super pervert. I knew I could count on you, eyes, Naruto said, grinning, kukukuku. Had Issei been paying more attention to the blonde next to him instead of thinking about how he would make the title of super pervert proud, he may have heard the sinister laugh that Naruto emitted, and not been so eager to take up the title and all that came with it. Then again, maybe not. This was Issei after all. Cat CHRP. That's right, everyone, feast your eyes on the legendary super pervert, ha 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 ha. Kaneko, still sitting on the rook she had defeated, did not even bother to keep the deadpanned expression off her face as she stared at the perverted teen currently laughing his figurative ass off. I misjudged him. Issei senpai is the worst. Issei did not even hear her, busy as he was laughing like a certain lecherous old man. Up in the heaven of another dimension, said lecherous old man also began laughing when he sensed someone else was following the ways of the super pervert. Unfortunately, because he was peeking in the hot springs at the time he started his laughing antics, he ended up getting beaten half to death for his lack of discretion. Some things change. Others remain the same. Issei, Kaneko, can you hear me? At the sound of Ria's voice, Issei stopped laughing. There was a time for basking in his accomplishments and perversion, and there was a time for business. Now was the time for business, most unfortunately. He pushed a finger against the communicator in his ear. We hear you, what's up? Akino's preparations are complete. The two perked up. If Akino was done then it meant things were about to start heating up. Literally. Continue with the plan. Already knowing what the plan was, Issei and Kaneko quickly bolted out of the gym, ignoring the angry shouts of the servants they left behind. Hey, get back here, we aren't done yet, my clothes, my staff. Yeah, those. Neither Issei nor Kaneko felt like responding to the taunts of people who already lost. There wasn't much point, and they really didn't want to be inside of that building when the fireworks started. As soon as they cleared the imaginary safety line, Akino, who had been floating above the gym waiting for them, raised her hand high into the air and let loose with an intense blast of lightning. Issei watched in awe and more than a little shock as the brick and cement that made up the replica exploded outwards, along with millions of glass shards as lightning rained down on it in an almost unending bolt. If he had to describe the scene, he would have to say it looked like Zeus or some other lightning god had gone to town on the building after it offended them due to its lack of aesthetic appeal. By the time Akino was satisfied that her job is done, there was nothing left of the gym but a crater. A really big crater several hundred meters wide and a couple meters deep. The entire school building was destroyed. Decimated. In other words, it was reduced to less than a pile of rubble. 3 pawns and 1 rook belonging to Riser Phenex-sama have retired. As Issei stared at the smoking crater that signified the distinct lack of remains to the school gymnasium, he made a solemn vow that he would never get on Akino's bad side. Unless getting on her bad side served the greater purpose of seeing her wonderful boobs. He had to keep the legacy going, after all. Cat CHRP, Naruto ignored the sounds of raging battle. The young Uzumaki blocked everything out. He was even oblivious to the loud explosion that rang out just seconds ago. To him, nothing mattered except for the act of gathering as much nature chakra as his body could maintain. Senjutsu was the drawing of the natural energy of the world inside of oneself and blending it with their own chakra, which added a new dimension of power to the sage's chakra called Senjutsu chakra. In order to properly gather the Senjutsu chakra, the user was required to balance their physical and spiritual energy with the chakra they gather from nature. While gathering natural energy, the gatherer had to remain completely still in order to become one with nature. If the practitioner could achieve a perfect balance between the physical and spiritual energies of their own chakra and the energies of nature, they could produce a chakra that was many times stronger called Senjutsu chakra. That was the basic lesson that Naruto had been taught when he had been at Mount Myoboku to train as a sage after Jiraiya's death. It was one of the few lessons he understood, after it had been explained in terms of ice cream and toppings by Gamakichi. According to old man Fukusaku, using Senjutsu required insane amounts of chakra. Basically, cage-level reserves. This was something of an euphemism. Technically speaking, You did not need high levels of chakra to gather nature energy or even enter sage mode. It just wouldn't give much of a boost if someone's chakra was smaller, and the sage mode would not last as long. Naruto likened it to a bowl of ramen. If the broth was Naruto's spiritual energy and the noodles were his physical energy, then the bowl was the amount of chakra he had to use. Following this analogy, as inane and stupid as it sounded, if the broth was his spiritual energy, the noodles his physical energy, and the bowl the size of his chakra, then the toppings were the amount of natural energy he could gather. This was because of the perfect balance one needed between the three energies in order to enter sage mode. Too little natural energy gathered and nothing would happen. Too much and he would turn into a toad statue. Not a pleasant thought. Back when he had first mastered sage mode, Naruto's reserves had been humongous. Going with the ramen example, his reserves would be considered the special supersized Uzumaki Deluxe. Now it was only a medium-sized bowl. At a guess, Naruto probably had about as much as Sasuke had after their 3 years apart. Decent sized, definitely around the level of a Jonin, but certainly nothing to boast about. It would have to be enough. As soon as he entered sage mode, Naruto felt the telltale signs of his change. Unlike Jiraiya, who had not mastered sage mode and been forced to become more amphibian because he could not properly balance his physical and spiritual energy with nature, the only change in Naruto were his eyes, which he knew by now would have a reddish-brown pigment markings around his eyes and horizontal, golden-slitted pupils. With a deep breath, Naruto stopped gathering chakra and stood up. It was nearly time. The others must be coming closer by now. A frown marred his face. There was someone missing. Several more explosions rocked the replica of the academy as Naruto finally exited the building. Once outside, he found his comrades easily enough. Akaino was fighting Riser's queen. Kiba was dishing out speedy moves against another swordsman. Women, and Issei looked like he was surrounded and trying to survive against someone with a bit more combat experience than him. The frown on his face grew ever more prominent as he dashed towards Issei, his speed so great that he literally tore up the ground as he moved. Within seconds he was within range to attack the masked female attacking his perverted companion and did so without hesitation. A loud bang, like the sound of a cannon going off, pervaded the grounds as Naruto unleashed a devastating straight right into the masked woman's face. The female in question was blasted backwards at speeds that were so fast the air around her literally created a funnel as she was thrown straight through the tree line. Trees were felled, snapping and splintering like twigs. They hit the ground with a loud crash. The woman tore a path straight through the tree line. Talk about a devastating attack. Damn, it was good to be back in sage mode. One of Riser Phenex Sama's rooks has been retired. One hit. A little blonde girl who couldn't be older than Kaneko shrieked out in shock, clearly surprised by such an unexpected turn of events. He took out Isabella in one hit. What kind of monster is he? Naruto ignored the girl as he turned to look at the stunned Issei. You alright? Yeah, I'm fine. Issei shook himself out of his stupor as he looked at the devastation caused by Naruto's punch. There was a large path that had been blazed through the forest by Isabella. It looked like God had taken a razor blade and decided to shave a straight line through the forest. That attack was incredible, blonde bastard sensei. I had no idea you were so. What's up with your eyes? Just a small power-up I thought I might need, Naruto reassured. There was no need to explain the mechanics of his new abilities to Issei, nor would he understand even if Naruto did explain it. Well, maybe if he used his ramen analogy, but that was neither here nor there. Nothing to worry about. The blue-eyed devil looked around and frowned again. More importantly, where is Kaneko? Last I remember she was with you, but I can't sense her anymore. At the mention of Kaneko, Issei grimaced and looked away, his arms shaking as he clenched his fingers into a fist. Naruto did not need more than a second to understand what the expression and actions meant. His fists clenched and he grit his teeth. I see, he said, breathing heavily through his nose. For a second, something flashed across the blonde's visage, something terrifying. Issei almost backed away in fright. But when the golden-haired youth with the spiky locks opened his eyes again, his expression was calm and composed, if a tad cold. Who did it? Issei. Who took out Kaneko? It was Riser's queen. His queen. Naruto looked over at the battle going on between Akaino and Yubaluna. He wanted nothing more than to go over there and beat that woman to death for hurting his precious friend. Just looking at the woman caused his desire to rip her flesh from her bones and rip her internal organs out one by one was almost overpowering. Naruto did not like it when people hurt those precious to him, game with a low chance of death or not. It didn't help that there was an annoying voice in his head telling him to kill everyone there. Issei, he turned around and faced the crowd of Phenex servants surrounding them. It looks like Akeno is having some trouble. Please lend her a hand. Issei looked confused. I cannot help Akeno as I am, Naruto continued, so I'll need you to avenge Kaneko in my place. Okay? He would not lash out in anger. Revenge was not his way of doing things. It never had been. And Naruto would not allow himself to stoop so low that he would destroy another person for the sake of revenge. Issei sucked in a breath, then nodded. You got it, Naruto. Good luck. As Issei began to run off, one of Riser's servants, a knight, judging by their speed, launched herself towards Issei in an effort to stop him. The woman was on Ria's pawn in nearly a second flat, her form solidifying from the streak it had been to a full-bodied figure on Issei's left. Oh no you don't. With speed that was unprecedented, Naruto vanished. A second later, the knight, a young woman with dark black hair arrayed in 5 ponytails around her head that was being held up by a golden accessory on the crown of her head, was suddenly sent flying into the air as something hit her with enough force to shatter her jaw like it was made of glass. What hit her? Naruto, with a classic, if nearly earth-shattering, uppercut. Up the woman soared, flying high into the sky at speeds that were close to breaking the sound barrier. At the apex of her flight, the knight forced herself to act through the pain she was suffering under and open her eyes. She promptly wished she hadn't, as the last thing she saw was a pair of leather heels descending towards her face. Naruto landed back on his feet as the knight he heel stomped crashed next to him with enough force that a large indent was borne into the ground. The earth fractured, cracks and fissures tore the ground apart. Large chunks of gravel were upheaved with startling violence. In the center of that crater filled with spider web-patterned splinters was none other than the knight, who had been rendered mercifully unconscious when Naruto heel stomped her in the face. And the knight soon vanished into light particles. Riser Phenex Sama's knight has been retired. Cold yellow eyes with bar-like pupils glared at the rest of Riser's peerage, peering out at them from underneath golden bangs. These eyes, which appeared to be made from chips of ice, surveyed the prey surrounding him. There were only 4 left, 2 cat girls, a young woman wearing elaborate purple robes, and a blonde girl with her hair in twin, drill-like curls and dark blue eyes. All 4 of them took a step back in fear and hesitation when they spotted the glacial gaze that settled upon them. I apologize in advance, Naruto slid into the frog kata stance. But since it seems taking my anger out on Yubaluna is not in the cards, I'm going to have to take it out on you. If you want to blame someone for the ass-kicking you're about to receive, blame your master for forcing this game on my king. Cat CHRP. Akeno could have sworn if she were the type who was inclined to swearing. This battle had gone on for way too long as far as she was concerned, and the Yamato Nadeshiko was more than ready to end it. There was no doubt in her mind about who was the better fighter between her and Riser's queen. The woman had put up a good fight, but the superior skills Akeno had displayed proved that she was the stronger queen. This battle should have ended the moment Yubaluna lay on the ground in crater of her own making, her powers exhausted from their magic-intensive battle. She would have been defeated too, had she not pulled out her trump card, Phenex Tears, a rare liquid that only the Phenex family could create. With those tears all of the wounds someone received and all the magic power they lost would be restored instantly. It would be as if all the damage they had received never happened in the first place, and Yubaluna drank it. Talk about tough luck. It was just like Riser's servants to resort to such devious and underhanded tactics. Now Akeno was caught between a rock and a hard place. She didn't have much magic left, and what little she did have left was being used to shield herself from Yubaluna's attacks. That wouldn't be enough to win. Her shield would eventually fail and she would be defeated. Akeno didn't want to fail her king, but it was looking more and more like she wouldn't have any choice in the matter. Dragon shot. 2 sets of eyes widened as a large surge of power erupted from below them. Yubaluna was barely able to dodge out of the way, swerving to the left just in time to avoid the giant beam of red, destructive energy that nearly defeated her in a single blow. The conical beam of sheer destruction ravaged through the airspace, the heat emitted from it singing the atmosphere and leaving a heavy tang of burnt ozone in the air. Akeno looked down at where the blast originated from, and surprised to see a figure standing there, his gauntlet-covered arm still extended in a semblance of a punch. Only what had just happened was no punch, no way no how. Eyes. Akeno-senpai. Issei shouted up at her. I'm here to help you get rid of this woman. Allow me to lend you my strength. Akeno held a hand to her chest. Why was her heart beating so fast at his words? It was such a strange feeling, one she had never felt before. Strange, but also wonderful. Perhaps she could explore this feeling later on after the rating games. TCH. It's that useless pawn, Yubaluna scowled at the intruder. You might think I'm just a useless pawn, but this useless pawn would show you what he can do. Issei held out his gauntlet-covered hand out. He glared at the red-scaled sacred gear with a fierce will and unbreakable determination. If you're listening to me in there, then listen to this. I need you to give me more power. Allow me to show her my resolve. Dragon Booster. More. I need more power. Dragon Booster Second Liberation. At the gauntlet's proclamation, the Red Dragon Emperor's gauntlet changed. A second gem appeared near the elbow as the gauntlet's scale-like mail lengthened, covering up more of Issei's arm. The gauntlet took on a tad more streamlined look, no longer bulky and unwieldy, but smooth and sleek. Now it truly looked like a dragon's clawed arm. Akeno-senpai, unleash as much lightning as you can. Akeno smiled deviously. If that is your wish, I can certainly oblige you. She didn't have much magic left, but she had enough for this. The sky above darkened as thunderclouds gathered. Flashes of lightning flared within their tumultuous depths. The flashes grew brighter and brighter until a blinding blue bolt of lightning struck Issei, who had thrust his gauntlet-covered hand into the air. Rather than turn him into a crispy cinder, the lightning was absorbed into the gauntlet, which began glowing a bright blue. Sparks emitted from the sacred gear, electrical surges that arced and skittered across the surface of the red scale mail, creating light blue refractions that bounced off the armored gauntlet. Transfer. What happened next was unprecedented. The entire world around them lit up in a brilliant display of power. Arcs of arcane energies surged around Issei's body as all of Akeno's magic from the attack she had hit him with was boosted to several times its normal strength. Let's do a little math so you can get an understanding of how powerful the attack was now. When Issei uses his boosted gear, each time he does his power is doubled. So if Issei had 10 pennies, then he now has 20 pennies. When Akeno's attack was absorbed into Issei's boosted gear, the attack was not tripled in power because he was at level 3. It was factored by 3. So if Akeno's attack had 100 pennies, then it now has 1,000,000 pennies or x equals 100x 100x 100. In other words, Yubaluna didn't stand a chance. A large cone of lightning flew out of Issei's hand and struck Riser's queen, Yubaluna, full on. Her scream of agony went unheard beneath the roar of the lightning attack. Even her body disappeared within the brilliant blaze of cackling electricity that had morphed into a beam. When the powerful attack finally died down, Yubaluna was gone. Riser Sama's queen has retired. Ha! Ha! I did it! Issei whispered in shock, his shoulders heaving as he tried to regain his breath. He couldn't believe it. He had just beaten Riser's queen, the most powerful member of his peerage aside from Riser himself. Sure, he'd had Akeno's help. Without her lightning magic, he would have not been able to do anything on his own. But, still, it did not change the fact that he had beaten a vastly superior opponent in a single attack. That you did. And just like that, his small moment of exultation died a horrible, horrible death as two big, soft, round things pushed themselves against his back. The feel of those lush, bountiful opi pressing themselves against him served to derail all thoughts on his victory, not just halting them in his track, but ensuring they would disappear entirely. Akeno-senpai. Issei squeaked as the woman in question wrapped her arms around the boy's neck and began nuzzling the curve of his jaw with her nose. The perverted second year shuddered at the feeling of her nose gently rubbing against him. How something like that felt so good was beyond him. You have no idea how hot watching you blow that woman up made me, Akeno whispered lustfully. Issei's body began to shake as he was hit with both arousal and fear. Of course she would be turned on, she was a sadist. You know, her voice purred, oozing with lecherous and most likely painful intentions. I've always been hoping I could find someone who wanted to do a little S&M. How about it? You can be the M. Issei whimpered. Cat CHRP. Revel Phenex could do nothing more than watch the battle taking place in front of her with horror-filled eyes. No, she couldn't truly call this a battle, for calling it a battle implied that there was a chance of victory for either side. There was no such chance here. Massacre was a much more apt term for what was happening here. The members of Riser's peerage went against this strange devil with the golden-colored eyes and bar-like pupils and were defeated like wheat falling before the scythe. He cut them down without hesitation or mercy. They simply didn't stand a chance against this strange blonde-haired man. The first girl to fall was Mahai, the last of Riser's rooks. She had long raven hair with 2 tassels that went on either side of her hair behind her ears, and was wearing an elaborate purple kimono that covered almost all of her body save her face. Being the last piece that was not a pawn aside from Revel herself, and the only one with any hand-to-hand combat skills, she was the first one to break out of her fear and attempt to take this strange blonde down. It was a mistake that would prove to be her undoing. She closed the distance between the two of them as quickly as she could. Because she was a rook and not a knight, she was not very fast. Where a knight would have gotten to the blue-eyed male within the blink of an eye, Mahai took several seconds to close the distance between the two of them. When she did get within range of Naruto, she lunged towards him, pushing off with her back foot and punching with the opposite arm of the leg she used to push off with. Naruto didn't even bother moving away. He simply raised his hand and caught Mahai's fist as easily as he would catch a styrofoam ball that had been lobbed his way with an overhand toss. Mahai's eyes barely had time to widen before he retaliated, yanking her forward so brutally that her arm was pulled from its socket. Her shriek of pain was cut off mid-cry when Naruto followed through with the first part of his attack by striking her in the gut with a knee. There was a loud whoosh as all the air escaped Mahai's lungs, followed by her body soaring away from the blonde. She was launched backwards for several meters before striking the ground hard. Afterwards, her body tumbled across the dirt like a rag doll that had been thrown by a rampaging giant. Each time a part of her body struck the earth, it left indisputable proof that she had been there. It wasn't until she crashed through a boulder that Mahai's momentum was finally stopped. Riser Phenex Sama's rook has retired. This proclamation was followed by Naruto attacking the last remaining members of Riser's peerage. The 2 pawns. They didn't stand a chance. One was struck in the head, her face planting itself into the ground. The other received a punch to the gut, which caused her to get blown backwards with enough force that she too was sent into the tree line, mimicking what happened to Isabella. 2 of Riser Phenex Sama's pawns have retired. Riser Phenex Sama's knight has retired. Revel did not even hear the announcement that proclaimed her as the only remaining member of Riser's peerage left. Her entire being was focused on the man who had just decimated a good majority of her brother's peerage and was now walking towards her. His steps reverberated clearly ominously across the ground. Each step he took further hammered the sense of despair and fear that washed over her. Stay away! Revel shrieked in fear, tumbling to the ground as she stumbled backwards. Naruto did not heed her words and continued marching towards her, forcing Revel to crawl backwards in order to keep the distance between them. This stopped when she found her back against a tree. "Please," she whispered, tears beginning to stain her cheeks as she felt her fear overpower her pride. "Please don't hurt me." The blonde paused, then, with a sigh, crouched down so that they were eye to eye. "Hurt you?" Naruto looked genuinely confused, causing Revel to blink. "How could I possibly hurt someone who's so cute?" Revel didn't even have time to truly register his statement before she found herself being pulled into a monstrous hug. However, after the shock of his words left her, embarrassment felt it, not just at his words, but at the fact that he was hugging her. Not just hugging her, but actually rubbing his cheek against hers like some kind of cat showing affection to their owner. "Ah, you're so adorable. Who knew that douchebag had such a cute sister?" Revel didn't know what was more embarrassing, his words, or the fact that he was giving her far more affection than anyone else ever had. Get off me. Finally, after who knew how long, Revel finally managed to overcome her embarrassment by activating her Tsunere protocols, which really just involved her shoving Naruto away by placing a hand on his face and prying him off her. When he was no longer holding her, she glared at him, though the effect was ruined by her red face. Don't you know who I am? I'm Revel Phenex. Why you can't just get so close to me like that? I can't. Naruto tilted his head and looked at her with a confused stare. Why not? Why you just can't? Okay. Revel shouted. She then looked away, trying to hide her red cheeks. Besides, I don't even know you. In that case. Revel blushed when Naruto grabbed her hand and began shaking it in greeting. Hi. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen, training, ramen, Rias, ramen, Kaneko-chan, ramen, cute things, ramen, anything with orange in it, and ramen. I dislike people who try to take my ramen, ramen haters, people who don't like the color orange, idiots who think killing people is fun, and douchebags who hurt my cane. My hobbies are trying different flavors of ramen and training, and my dream is to become the ultimate badass of the universe. Your turn. I'm Revel Phenex, the blonde girl started before she even realized what she was saying. And I like wait, why the hell am I telling you this? I don't even know you. What do you mean? I just introduced myself, didn't I? That's not enough to say you know someone, of course it is. No it isn't, and let go of my hand. No? What? You're bleeding. Revel looked down to where the blonde was looking to see that she was indeed bleeding from a small wound on her left index finger. She must have cut herself against a rock when she had been trying to escape from him. It will be fine, she murmured. My powers aren't fully mature yet, so they take a while for them to activate. Well, while it is, why don't I help you with that? Revel's cheeks flared to life with the brightest shade of red ever known to man when Naruto stuck her finger in his mouth and began to gently run his tongue over the wound. What are you doing? Revel squeaked, almost instinctively. Her hand jerked itself out of his mouth so that she could slap him. Before it could escape, however, Naruto caught her hand again and brought her wounded finger back to his mouth. Even though this place is a replica, the dirt is still real, Naruto told her. I don't know if you guys are immune, but if your powers haven't matured yet, there is a chance your wound can get infected. My saliva has very strong healing properties and tends to kill bacteria instantly. Turning her hand over, he showed Revel her finger. Where once there had been a thin line leaking blood, now there is nothing, just perfectly pink, healthy-looking skin. See? Oh. What did she say to that? This guy, who had destroyed nearly 3/4 of her brother's peerage on his own, had also just healed her injury, however small a wound it may have been, and was treating her very kindly, if a tad creepily. She wasn't really sure how to take it. An explosion rocking the area caused Naruto and Revel to look over at the new school building's roof, where they could see a battle taking place between Rias and Riser. It looks like it's time for me to go. Naruto stood up. I would suggest you stay here. I would hate to see you get injured by one of my friends. As Naruto began to walk away, Revel threw him the question she wanted. No, that she needed to know. Are you going to kill my brother? No, Naruto didn't even pause as he continued walking. I detest killing, and would never kill someone unless I had no other option. But I am going to kick his ass for what he put Rias through. If you don't want to watch, I suggest retreating to a safer distance. And just like that, the strange man who had mercilessly tore through several of her brother's servants and treated her with an unusual amount of kindness was gone. Slowly, a blush began to form on her fair cheeks. Cat CHRP. Rias winced as another of Riser's flame attacks bashed against the magical shield she had created. Fire licked at the edges of the red barrier that was shaped in the form of a magic circle with the Gremory family crest in its center. Even though the attack was blocked, Rias could still feel the heat coming from it. The intensity was enough that she was almost